Mom and Dad were so angry, but they said they'd forgive you if you apologized. What? Why should I apologize? I can't get along with people who think that way. I'm never seeing them again. Don't be ridiculous. If that's how you feel, I'm divorcing you. Get out. Actually, I was just about to leave. My name is Jade, I'm 30 years old, and I work in an office. Recently, my boyfriend, Harry, proposed to me. We met at a meetup for online gamers since we both love gaming. Harry is 7 years older than me. He's kind, understanding, and respects my love for work. What I like most is that he gives me space when I need it. Even though Harry proposed, I wasn't sure what to do. I had never really thought about getting married. It seemed like too much responsibility and felt like it would limit my freedom. It's not that I want to date around or anything, I just enjoy focusing on work. Work makes me happy. Honestly, I don't even know what to do on my days off. Maybe I'm a little odd. This is why most of my past relationships didn't work out. My ex-boyfriends would say things like, "You're like a guy, why should I change my plans for your job?" In the end, most men want to feel in control. They'd expect me to be a housewife or think household chores are only for women. That's not for me. So, I've never thought of marriage as a fairy tale ending. But then Harry proposed, and I decided to test him. "I'm not quitting my job." "Of course not," he said. "I might not want to go out on my days off." "I don't mind," he replied. "We'll share the housework, right? I've been living alone for years, I'm fine with that," he assured me. "When I'm busy with work, we might not spend much time together. Is that okay? I have hobbies, so I know how to enjoy my time alone," he said calmly. Finally, I asked him, "Why do you even want to marry me?" His response surprised me. "Even if everything you said is true, I don't want you to end up with someone else. Even if we only live together on weekends or live apart, I still want to marry you. I don't want us to just be boyfriend and girlfriend, I want us to promise to love each other forever. That's my selfish wish. But if you don't want marriage, that's okay too. We can do common law marriage if that works better for you." Hearing this made me realize he really understood me. He wasn't asking me to change who I am. I knew I could make this work with Harry. Maybe I wouldn't have to give up anything about my life to be married. So, I said yes. I had always told my family and friends that I didn't plan on getting married. So, when I told them the news, they were all shocked. My mom even cried tears of joy. That's when I realized how much this meant to her. She had always said, "Live the life you want," but deep down, I think she really wanted to see me get married. It made me so happy to see her smile. I felt glad I had decided to get married. After our wedding, Harry and I started our life as husband and wife. We moved into our new home, unpacked, and finished all the tricky paperwork. One day, Harry suggested we spend a night at his parents' house. He said some relatives would be gathering there on Saturday. "I need to make sure I don't do anything rude," I told him. "Don't worry," Harry reassured me. "My parents are older and will probably think of you more like a granddaughter than a daughter-in-law. You'll be fine." That made me feel a little better. I wanted to make a good impression on my in-laws after the wedding, so I agreed to go. But I had no idea what was coming. To prepare, I called my mom for advice. Since my dad passed away when I was young, my mom raised me on her own. I love and respect her, and I always go to her when I need guidance. "Should I bring an apron?" I asked. "Yes," Mom said. "It's best to ask if they need help first, and if they do, be ready to pitch in. Also, don't forget to bring a gift for them." "Got it, thanks, Mom." After our talk, I felt much more confident. This is going to go well, I thought. On the day of the visit, I was completely prepared. Harry drove, and after about 40 minutes, we arrived at his parents' house. This was the first time I'd see his parents and relatives since the wedding. Harry told me they were all excited to meet me, so I felt less nervous and even a bit excited myself. When we got there, I could hear the relatives chatting inside. It sounded like they had already started eating and drinking. I followed Harry into the living room. "Oh, you're here." His parents greeted us warmly. Come in, let's toast again." Harry's parents were already a little tipsy and looked very cheerful. We sat down, and I handed them the gift I had brought. "Oh, thank you so much," they said with big smiles. "Is there anything I can do to help?" I asked, pulling an apron from my bag. Harry's parents quickly reply, No, there's no need, you just sit here and enjoy yourself." "Okay, thank you," I say, a little surprised. Both of them insist I relax and enjoy the dinner. Considering their age, Harry's mom is 68, and his dad is 72, it starts to make sense. Maybe, as Harry said, they see me more like a granddaughter than a daughter-in-law. Everything seems fine as dinner continues, but then it happens. Here's another beer, Harry's mom says, handing me a drink. Thank you, I reply politely. The wedding was wonderful, wasn't it? She says, smiling. Yes, thank you, I respond. Then she adds, but if I had one complaint, it would be about your mother. I freeze. I'm sorry, what do you mean? She casually says, the scar on her face, it's hard to look at. It kind of ruins the mood of a celebration, don't you think? She tried to cover it with makeup, but it still stood out. If I had a scar like that, I'd never attend a wedding. I can't believe what I'm hearing. Before I can respond, Harry's dad chimes in, well, I guess it couldn't be helped. Without a father, it'd look bad if she didn't come. So, even with that scar, she had to show up, though it's pretty embarrassing. I feel my blood boil. How could they say this about my mom? My mom's scar is from a tragic accident. When I was a child, my dad was driving us when a speeding car from the opposite lane crashed into us. My dad swerved to protect us, but he hit a pole and died instantly. Mom had jumped over me in the back seat to shield me. A piece of glass from the windshield struck her face, leaving her with that scar. She saved my life that day. Harry's parents don't know this story, but Harry does. I told him everything before. I look at Harry, expecting him to speak up for me, for my mom, but he just looks uncomfortable, glances down at his plate, and keeps eating. Are you seriously not going to defend me? I think, feeling completely let down. As for Harry's parents, their behavior is beyond unacceptable. They're laughing, mocking my mom, and saying these cruel things in front of everyone. It's unthinkable. I couldn't just let this go. Excuse me, why would you say something like that? Have you even considered why my mom has that scar? They seemed shocked by my sudden outburst, and the room fell silent. She got that scar trying to protect me during the accident where we lost my dad. If she hadn't saved me, I might have been hurt, or even died. Making fun of someone's scars without knowing their story? That's incredibly childish. I stood up. I'm sorry, but I'm going home. Everyone looked uncomfortable, and my in-laws turned red. Harry just stared at me with his mouth wide open. I left the house, caught a cab to the station, and took a train home. Once I got home, I decided to pack my things and leave, but it was already night, and I couldn't drive because I'd been drinking, so I spent the night there instead. I decided I'd wait for Harry to come home the next day. I wanted to leave, but I felt I should hear him out first. When Harry came home, he was visibly angry. He threw his bags on the floor and glared at me. What was that? You embarrassed me and my parents. Your parents are the ones to blame. They insulted my mom in front of everyone. You know why she has that scar, and you didn't defend me. That's not what I'm talking about. First, apologize for embarrassing me and my parents. What do you mean? That's not what you're talking about? If your parents hadn't acted that way, none of this would have happened. You're insulting my parents again. No, I'm not. I'm just telling the truth about what happened. My parents are angry, but they said they'll forgive you if you apologize. They're being generous, and you should be grateful. What? Why should I apologize? I can't get along with people who would say that. I'll never see them again. Don't be stupid. If you don't apologize, I'm divorcing you. Get out. Actually, I was just about to leave. I grabbed the bags I had already packed. You were planning to leave? Yes, because your family was awful to me. Fine, then I have something for you too. He pulled out the divorce papers and slammed them on the table. They were already filled out, and his parents had signed as witnesses. They'd clearly talked about this and decided that if I didn't listen to them, he would give me these papers. Unbelievable. So, are you scared? If you're sorry at all, we can go to my parents' house right now to apologize. I couldn't believe he thought this was a good way to pressure me. I picked up the divorce papers and my bags and walked out of the house without saying another word. Hey, Harry shouted after me, but I ignored him. I went straight to my mom's house. On the way, I submitted the divorce papers. This meant that I had nothing more to do with Harry. When I return home, my mom is shocked to see me. After I tell her what happened, she looks worried. I'm so sorry, this is all my fault. Mom, don't say that. I love and respect you more than anyone. If someone insults you, I won't forgive them, Not even if it's my husband or his parents. Thank you, Jade. A few days pass, and Harry keeps trying to contact me, but I ignore him. Eventually, he can't wait any longer and shows up at the door. I don't want to let him in, so we talk outside. Will you talk to me? You need to come home right now, he demands. Why should I? We're done. I don't have anything to do with you anymore. What? What do you mean? I submitted the divorce papers. What? We're not married anymore. Don't be ridiculous. Why would you do that? You were the one who filled them out. I just had to submit them. I was just trying to threaten you. I don't care. Why would you fill out divorce papers just to threaten me? I can't believe this. I'm going to get us married again. I'm not signing anything, and I've already taken steps to make sure that can't happen. Impossible. Harry suddenly looks defeated. Please reconsider. We were in love. You know that's not why you want to stay married, right? What do you mean? You want me to take care of your parents, right? Harry freezes, clearly surprised. Your parents are older now, and they've got health issues. You wanted a wife who would take care of them, right? Otherwise, you'd have to do it all yourself since you're their only son. He's totally shaken. I just. Then his anger flares up. Fine, you know what? You're coming back right now. No way, I'm not taking care of your parents. They have nothing to do with me anymore. Shut up, I'm taking you back home whether you like it or not. Do you think you can threaten me? I'm serious, I'll be back. Just then, a man appears behind Harry. I look at him, surprised. The man speaks to Harry. What do you mean by that, sir? Huh? Who are you? Oh, forgive me. The man shows Harry his badge. Police. Are you really a cop? Yes, I patrol the area undercover. I can call for backup if you'd like. No, it's fine. Are you stalking this woman? No, I'm her husband. Her husband? It looks like she's in trouble. He's my ex-husband, we're divorced, and now he's stalking me. What are you talking about? Could you please explain, sir? I'm asking you to come with me to the station. No, I just wanted to talk. I'll come back later. Panicked, Harry runs off. Jade, are you okay? You really surprised me, Mitch. I didn't expect you to show up like that. The policeman is Mitch, my childhood friend. I've recently been assigned to a station nearby. Really? Good thing you were patrolling here, thanks. No problem. Actually, I got a call from your mom. Huh? I look inside the house and see my mom smiling at me. She lives alone, so I was worried and decided to check on her once in a while. Really? I didn't know. We planned together to surprise you when you came back. Did you? We sit down in the living room, and I explain everything that happened with Harry. Mitch suggests I get a restraining order, so I do it right away. With that, I'm able to completely cut ties with Harry and his family. As for Harry, I hear from a mutual friend that his parents are now struggling with their health issues. He's taking care of them while also working, and he can't get remarried. He's just working and caring for them. It serves him right. As for me, I'm happy focusing on my work. There has been one change, though. My childhood friend Mitch is now my husband. Now, I live happily with my husband and mom. Looking back, I can't believe Harry and his parents acted that way. It wasn't just about them being old or not understanding, it was wrong. I'm so glad Jade left them behind. She deserves to be with someone who truly understands her. Congrats to her. I hope she lives happily ever after with her family. Thanks for watching until the end. If you liked the video, don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.
Among friends and acquaintances there were two opposing views of Patrick. Some saw him as a kind-hearted man you could always count on. Others considered him a whim who couldn't say no and let people walk all over him. Perhaps both perspectives held some truth. Regardless, Patrick's circle deeply loved and respected him, particularly because he never refused a request, especially from those close to him. Yet Patrick himself wasn't fond of this trait, as it had caused him trouble in the past. From childhood, he had been gentle and timid. Rather than teaching him to stand up for himself, his family constantly pressured him, a factor that shaped his entire life. He grew so accustomed to following his parents' will that he gradually lost the ability to make independent decisions, finding it easier to simply agree with them. Under this parental influence, he made choices that contradicted his dreams and vision of a happy future. Music had been Patrick's passion since childhood, and he showed remarkable talent in it. At just 6 years old, he quickly learned guitar from the older neighbourhood boys and asked to attend music school. His parents readily agreed, believing that artistic pursuits benefited a child's overall development. His mother had read somewhere that music enhanced brain development, and his father concurred, but they overlooked that, for their son, this was more than just a hobby. Perhaps they noticed his eyes lighting up when he played, but they dismissed it as a childhood phase. But for Patrick, music became his life's calling. Year after year, he immersed himself deeper into musical studies, becoming one of the top students at the music school. He performed in concerts, won awards in various competitions, and even formed a rock band with 2 classmates. He composed his own music and lyrics, earning high praise from both peers and teachers. Everyone around him supported his dream of performing and believed in his future success. Everyone except his family. When university application time arrived, Patrick's heart was set on the conservatory. He knew exactly what he wanted, had researched everything thoroughly, and had been preparing for quite some time. But when he shared his decision with his parents, he met unexpected opposition. His mother nearly fainted, as if he'd announced something terrible. After giving his wife heart medication and helping her lie down, his father sternly confronted him. "What's this about, Patrick? The conservatory? This won't do." "Dad, I don't understand why you and Mum are so upset. You've always known I love music. I've never hidden my desire to pursue a career in performing." "Yes, and we've encouraged it as a hobby. But notice, a hobby, not a profession." "Why not? Many people make their living in the arts." "Let others do what they want. You're different. You must continue the family dynasty. Your grandfather was a teacher, your mother and I are teachers. You have to honour this tradition." "But Dad," Patrick tried to object. "I don't want to hear it. If you like music, keep it as a hobby. No one limits you in this, but only in your spare time, because you're going to be a physics teacher. End of story." Inwardly, Patrick rebelled. His head was filled with convincing arguments in his defence. He even contemplated deceiving his parents, perhaps deliberately failing the entrance exams to the university while secretly applying to the conservatory. But these remained just thoughts and words. In reality, Patrick couldn't stand up to his mother and father. As the son of powerful and authoritarian parents, he had been conditioned since childhood to obey them unconditionally. He lacked the inner strength, that firmness of spirit that would have allowed him to forge his own path against the odds. Deep in his soul lurked the fear of failure. After all, art was an unpredictable field, while teaching offered security and stability. By age 35, Patrick had secured a stable, if unloved, position that he performed dutifully but without passion. Though respected by students and colleagues at the large university where he taught, happiness eluded him. It felt as if he were living someone else's life, one imposed upon him. This feeling became unbearable after losing his parents. When his mother passed away, followed shortly by his father, Patrick felt betrayed. Who would he answer to now? Who would take pride in his achievements? Everything seemed to have lost its purpose. Now, when he finally had no one to answer to, and the path to his dreams lay open, he was paralysed by fear of change. For years, Patrick lived in constant depression, disappointed in himself. He berated himself for lacking the courage to pursue his dreams in youth, and loathed his current inability to make changes. The inner turmoil poisoned his personal life, which was practically non-existent. His relationships with women invariably failed. Patrick expected his beloved to fill the void in his life and bring him peace. But this never happened. Each new romance ended in disappointment. Love brought no healing. This pattern continued until he met Marcia at his friend's birthday party. Though not a striking beauty, she was pretty in an ordinary way, like countless other women. Yet she possessed something that captivated men and caught Patrick's attention. Marcia was among those who embraced life fully and seized every opportunity. Ambitious and determined, she never stood still. She set bold goals and pursued them confidently. Unafraid of experiments, she wouldn't hesitate to start anew. Patrick fell in love with her courage and enthusiasm, qualities he lacked himself. He felt as if he'd finally found his missing half, the piece that would make his life complete, vibrant and harmonious. While Patrick fell for Marcia almost instantly, she viewed him differently. He wasn't quite her type. She preferred confident, successful men, yet she also enjoyed being admired, worshipped and cherished. That's what drew her to Patrick. True, he wasn't wealthy or particularly ambitious. He would likely remain in his university department until retirement, achieving nothing more. Such a man couldn't shower her with diamonds, luxury cars, or Maldives vacations. Though Marcia had always dreamed of such devotion, she remained practical. She understood that wealthy suitors wouldn't be falling at her feet, begging for her love. In fact, many of the less wealthy men she had met before were not particularly gallant, just pompous, arrogant, selfish creatures who demanded attention but offered nothing in return, chasing after every skirt they saw. No, with such men one couldn't build family happiness. But with someone like Patrick it seemed possible. Though he didn't grab stars from the sky, he could become a reliable, loving husband, someone to lean on, and perhaps even wrap around her finger. Marcia decided that while Patrick wasn't the most impressive catch, he was a convenient match she shouldn't pass up. Still, she didn't dive headfirst into the relationship, choosing instead to make him work a bit for her attention. He had to pursue her, naturally. When Patrick was nearly ready to give up, she finally showed him interest. He was absolutely ecstatic. Afraid to lose such a treasure, he wasted no time with marriage. After only 6 months together, he proposed and arranged a gorgeous wedding, spending the lion's share of his savings on it. Had he had more money, he would have spent even more, believing Marcia deserved the very best. From this marriage, Marcia essentially got everything she'd hoped for. From her perspective, Patrick turned out to be the perfect spouse, loving, caring and quiet. Patrick himself, however, had slightly different expectations of married life. While he knew whom he was marrying, he'd still hoped for at least some domestic comfort, but Marcia turned out to be a poor homemaker, or rather, none. She barely did anything at home, and Patrick couldn't bring himself to complain. He felt he had no moral right since his wife earned more and contributed more to their budget. The young family wasn't poor, but for Marcia it was never enough. Her obsession with money overshadowed everything else, including love and marriage. The ambitious careerist reacted harshly when her spouse brought up children. "Marcia, don't you think it's time to think about extending our family?" "What do you mean, Patrick? Do you want my mum to move in with us? I'm glad you love your mother-in-law so much, but I doubt that's necessary." "What's your mum got to do with it? I'm talking about having a baby. Why would you want a baby all of a sudden? Where did that come from?" "What do you mean, where from? Isn't that why people start families? Isn't having kids the natural progression of a relationship?" "I don't know about anyone else, but I'm not planning on that anytime soon." "But why?" "Of course you men can't understand what it's like for a woman to put her life on hold for at least a year. Do you realize how many opportunities I'll miss during maternity leave? I'll never make up for that lost time." "But isn't motherhood more important than career opportunities? Isn't becoming a mother a woman's main purpose?" "Patrick, let's end this pointless conversation. I understand you'd like to keep me at home, but that won't happen. As a woman, I alone decide when or if to have children. I'm sorry, but you don't get the final say in this. Patrick had no counter to such arguments. He couldn't force his wife to stay home, have children, and manage the household. After all, when he had proposed, he'd known perfectly well she wasn't a model housewife. What could he do but accept the consequences of his choice? But soon, events unfolded that Patrick couldn't ignore, or rather, a situation that had been developing for some time. The naive and trusting man never imagined his beloved wife would go so far in her career ambitions. Marcia already spent precious little time at home, but after she left her old job for a more promising position, Patrick began to fear he'd forget what his wife looked like. She worked nearly every weekend and often stayed late. A few times she even came home in the morning. After several sleepless nights of worry and suspicion, even someone as calm and patient as Patrick grew indignant. "Marcia, what kind of work is this? What could you possibly do at the office at night?" "Patrick, am I imagining things, or are you making inappropriate insinuations? Tell me directly, what are you accusing me of?" "I don't know what to think. What would you think if I worked nights and only came home in the morning?" "I'd assume you were busy with work, but I wouldn't accuse you of anything." "What business could there be at such hours when normal people are sleeping in their beds next to their spouses?" "I have to work overtime to prove myself to my bosses." "Yesterday we had an online negotiation with the Australians. You know about the time difference, right?" "Why are you doing this one? Isn't there anyone else?" "Because the deputy director position is about to become vacant, and I'm working my ass off to get that job instead of someone else. I'm doing this for us, for our future children, so we can have everything we need, while you sit in your department earning pennies, yet dare to reproach me?" Patrick strongly disagreed about earning pennies. His salary was excellent, enough to live on comfortably, though compared to his wife's earnings, it was indeed modest. Marcia had always been attracted to luxury and never hid it. Looking back, Patrick understood perfectly whom he had married. But what had he expected? That Marcia would suddenly transform into a model housewife? That she would abandon her career ambitions and agree to live paycheck to paycheck? Patrick spent several days deep in thought. The more he reflected, the more he realized his mistake. His recent anger towards his wife had transformed into guilt. Why had he confronted her with foolish questions and accusations? How dare he suspect her of anything? For about 2 weeks, he tried to earn his wife's forgiveness. He did everything to please her, bought flowers and gifts, ordered her favorite sushi from the nearby restaurant, paid compliments, showed interest in her work. But nothing worked. Marcia maintained her hurt expression and barely spoke to her husband. Marcia knew exactly what she was doing. She wanted to cultivate Patrick's guilt and eventually use the situation to her advantage. Though she hadn't yet decided what to ask of her spouse, she knew she'd think of something. However, Marcia's game backfired and became her own trap. Despite her cunning and calculations, she failed to foresee certain possibilities that she should have. Confident that her husband was faithfully waiting at home, she carried on her affairs without worry. Meanwhile, Patrick, desperate to earn her forgiveness and restore harmony at home, planned another surprise. He decided to meet Marcia after work and take her somewhere fun, perhaps to a nightclub. Though he didn't particularly enjoy such places, he was willing to endure some discomfort for his beloved wife, who had always loved crowded, lively venues. Since he didn't know exactly when she would finish work, he bought a bouquet of roses, parked near her office and waited. The wait proved lengthy. He sat in his car for 2 hours until his legs grew stiff and he needed to stretch. He paced back and forth for 40 minutes, chilled to the bone. How long could she work? What could possibly take this long? Everyone else had gone home hours ago. All the building's windows were dark except for one in the corner of the first floor. Patrick watched it, waiting for the light to go out. Though not entirely certain, he believed this was his wife's office, where supposedly strict, soulless bosses were exploiting her. Finally, he decided to approach the window for a closer look. Perhaps he could see if they were wrapping up or still working. Without hesitation, Patrick approached the building and peered through the window. Despite the lowered blinds, they didn't completely cover the glass. The gap at the bottom was just a few centimetres, but it was enough to reveal everything inside, though perhaps Patrick would have preferred never to witness it. The scene destroyed his entire life, shattering all illusions of a happy family and hopes for the future. What did Patrick see in the office? The atmosphere was decidedly not professional. An uncorked wine bottle stood on the table, with glasses, fruits, sweets, and other romantic dinner accompaniments. Only candles were missing from the scene. At the table sat an overweight, balding, generally unpleasant-looking man in his early 40s. On his lap sat Marcia, her blouse half unbuttoned. The man was apparently telling jokes, and Marcia laughed crudely before throwing himself into his arms and kissing him. The revolting scene made Patrick vomit. He wanted to flee, but shock paralysed his legs. He might have remained frozen there if a security guard hadn't emerged from the building, likely having spotted the suspicious figure on security cameras, peering through office windows. Anyway, thanks to the guard's foul language, Patrick came out of his stupor and ran away, as if he really was some criminal who had been caught in the act. He didn't even remember how he got home. Only one thought consumed him. I wish she'd never come back at all. But Marcia was in no hurry to come back. She appeared the next morning as if nothing had happened, humming a cheerful tune. It was 6:30, a time when Patrick was usually still asleep. When she entered the dark living room, the woman nearly screamed at the sight of a man's silhouette on the sofa. She thought a burglar had broken in. Who else would be sitting there in the semi-darkness, still wearing a hat and jacket? Marcia tried to retreat, but finding the light switch on the wall, flipped it on and sighed with relief. There sat not some dangerous criminal, but her mild-mannered husband. Marcia's relief lasted only a moment before tension gripped her again. Why was Patrick sitting in the living room instead of sleeping? Why was Patrick sitting in the living room instead of sleeping? Why was he in his street clothes? And why was he looking at her with such judgment and disappointment in his eyes? An unsettling feeling crept over her. Deep down she knew exactly what had happened, but pushed the thought away. Maintaining perfect composure and forcing a casual tone, she broke the silence. Patrick, why are you up so early? And why are you dressed? Are you going somewhere? No, I'm not going. I've just returned, actually. Haven't even had an opportunity to undress or go to bed. How interesting. Where were you? And why do you look so strange? Has something happened? Yes, Marcia, something has happened. To us. And apparently it happened long ago. Patrick, I don't understand. Speak plainly. Stop being cryptic and scaring me. Stop pretending you don't understand. I saw you. What do you mean? You saw me. Saw me where? Exactly what I said. I've had the privilege of seeing firsthand why you work late and how you get your promotions. What? You're spying on me? How dare you? Enough, Marcia. You've lost the right to make a fool of me or reproach me for anything. Pack your things and leave. Quietly, without drama. We're getting divorced immediately. Wait. Patrick, don't be hasty. Don't say things you'll regret. I don't know what you saw or heard, but you've misunderstood. Raymond and I were negotiating with the Australians until morning. Stop lying. What Australians? Since when does negotiating require sitting in your boss's lap and kissing him? Is this some new Australian's business protocol I'm unaware of? No, you don't understand. He felt ill. I was giving first aid. Enough, Marcia. Don't degrade yourself further. By noon, I want you and your belongings gone. Go to your mother's or go to your Raymond. I no longer care. Patrick, please, forgive me. Give me another chance. At these words, Marcia rushed towards her husband like a melodrama heroine. She tried to throw herself at his neck, but stopped short, terrified by his expression. She had never seen him like this before. The gentle, harmless man she knew had vanished, replaced by a stranger consumed with rage. Marcia backed away, frightened. For a moment she feared he might strike her. His fists were clenched, but Patrick didn't lay a finger on his unfaithful wife. He gave her one final scorching look before bolting from the apartment, not even slamming the door. He strode down the street with long, quick steps, mindless of his direction. It didn't matter where he went. He just couldn't stay still. Patrick needed to release his anger, to let off steam, and found no better way than pacing the city streets. At least it helped him temporarily escape his thoughts of how stupid and blind he'd been, of how much time he'd wasted on this unworthy woman, and most painful of all, thoughts of his own weakness and spinelessness. Even now, he couldn't truly stand up for himself. He had no words for Marcia. He had no words for Marcia that would strike her down and make her die of shame. He lacked the courage to confront Raymond and give him a well-deserved punch. All that remained was to suffer in silence. Meanwhile, in her husband's apartment, Marcia was beginning to come to her senses. Initially, she panicked. After all, despite everything, she did love Patrick, to some degree, though not deeply. And she didn't want to lose such a convenient husband who tolerated her whims and fulfilled her every desire. Moreover, Marcia felt humiliated by being caught in the act. Being discovered while cheating was degrading. It would tarnish her reputation and weaken her position in the divorce. But what position was there to worry about? She had no claim to Patrick's pre-marital apartment, and she had no use for his old car. As Marcia reflected, she realized that perhaps everything had happened for the best. With Patrick, she had stability and security. He was her safety net, but she had long felt bored and constrained. Marcia had known it was time to leave her comfort zone, yet she couldn't find a convincing reason to leave her husband. He was too perfect, too sinless, an angel in the flesh. His very correctness and honesty irritated Marcia the most. Perhaps she needed to experience such drama to break free from this promising yet stifling marriage and move forward. And Marcia certainly had somewhere to go. Her affair with her boss Raymond had been going on for 6 months. It wasn't a crude attempt at career advancement. With her intelligence, she could have earned a leadership position on merit alone. It was something else entirely. Raymond was precisely the man Marcia had always dreamed of. Though not as handsome or well-mannered as Patrick, he had money, connections and opportunities. Her lover showered her with luxury and promised her the world. The life Marcia had always wanted was now within reach. The relationship with Raymond had begun shortly after she started her new job. Curiously, Marcia never saw it as betrayal. She felt no guilt. To her, the intimate relationship with her boss was simply a means to achieve her career and financial goals. Her mind was so clouded by self-interest that she didn't see anything wrong with her behaviour. She couldn't even understand why Patrick had reacted so strongly. Marcia packed her belongings with indifference while planning her next moves. Though not yet officially divorced from Patrick, she was already scheming how to marry Raymond. Marcia was convinced she had her boss wrapped around her finger. He had been divorced for a year and had no obligations. Nothing stood in the way of remarriage. She just needed to nudge him in that direction. Of course, Marcia wouldn't tell her lover about being caught. She believed that an abandoned woman lost all appeal to men. So she decided to modify the truth. Leaving her half-packed suitcase in the middle of the living room, she went to Raymond's home. He was visibly surprised to find his mistress at his doorstep, mere hours after they'd parted. "Marcia, what are you doing here?" "Raymond, I couldn't help myself. I did something crazy and ruined my marriage. But I have absolutely no regrets. We love each other, and after last night I suddenly realized I don't want to hide any more. Can you believe it? I told my husband about us. I told him I was in love with another man, and I'm filing for divorce." "Why would you do that?" "But don't we love each other? You're free. I'm free now, and I don't have to hide from anyone. There's nothing stopping us from being together now, Raymond. I'm so happy." "Well, it's sudden. I didn't expect it. We'll have to talk it over." Raymond's reaction upset Marcia. After all, he had pursued her so ardently, had admired her so much. Where had all that passion gone? He wasn't acting like a man eager to rush to the registry office. His eyes showed surprise, panic, and even a touch of discomfort. Marcia wouldn't have been surprised if he had thrown her out immediately and cut her from his life entirely. However, Raymond, though clearly not ready for marriage or a serious relationship, wasn't cruel. While he wouldn't let her move in, he didn't abandon her either. Instead, he rented her an apartment near the office, convenient for both work and their dates. At first, Marcia regularly hinted about making their relationship official. Though he never directly refused, his evasive responses made it clear he had no intention of remarrying. This was understandable. His previous divorce had been brutal, with his ex-wife dragging him through the courts to claim as much property as possible. He was likely terrified of repeating that experience. When Raymond began responding aggressively to her hints about marriage, Marcia decided to back off. What would marriage give her that she didn't have already? Perhaps life was simpler without it. For 2 years, Marcia lived what seemed like a fairy tale. She achieved her dream of a management position, one she had worked so hard for. Raymond showered her with gifts, treated her to the finest restaurants, and took her on international trips. Recently, he'd even made her a co-owner of the firm, a full business partner. Yet she couldn't say she was completely happy. Only now did she realize that money and career weren't everything. Surprisingly, she found herself missing Patrick, or rather, his way of treating her. Though her ex-husband hadn't amounted to much in her eyes, he had treated her with genuine respect and devotion, practically carrying her on his hands. With him, she had truly felt like a queen. With Raymond, that feeling was hollow. Yet she had everything material she could dream of. But emotionally something was missing. She felt neglected, as if Raymond's heart was somewhere else, as if she were merely a beautiful toy rather than his life partner. However, Marcia would have preferred any status in the man's life to what fate, or rather her lover, for whom she had destroyed her marriage, was preparing for her. Packing for another romantic trip to Paris, she had no idea her life was about to change dramatically, her golden carriage turning into a pumpkin. She was excited about the trip, especially since now she had new leverage she hoped would finally convince Raymond to marry her. She planned to reveal her trump card in Paris, the city of love, hoping the romantic atmosphere would inspire a proposal. But it wasn't meant to be. The very day she planned to share her news, she woke up alone in their room. She was surprised to find Raymond missing. On vacation, he usually slept until noon. Where could he have gone? Marcia wondered, yawning as she rolled over and went back to sleep. When she woke again to find him still absent, worry began to set in. His phone was disconnected, and Marcia went to the reception to inquire about his whereabouts. Perhaps he'd gone to the gym or spa. The employee's response shocked her. Raymond had checked out. In broken French, Marcia tried to confirm this couldn't be true. How could he have checked out? That's impossible. The guest in room 545 checked out around 6 this morning. Maybe you misunderstood. Maybe he just went somewhere else for a while. No, the gentleman asked me to call him a cab to the airport. Something must have happened at work, or he wouldn't have left. Okay, then I'm checking out too. I'll need a cab. Whatever you say. Will you be paying the bill in cash or by card? I'm sorry. What bills are you talking about? Didn't the gentleman pay? No, he said his companion would pay. Marcia was shocked, especially about the bill. She had never paid for anything, living on Raymond's money, so she hadn't even considered the cost. She felt a pang of self-pity for spending her money, but there was no choice. She had to pay. The young woman could hardly believe this was really happening. She clung to hope that there had been some mistake, that the incompetent receptionist had misunderstood. But upon returning to the room and finding Raymond's things gone, Marcia had to accept the truth. Though the situation made her nervous, there was no panic in her soul, only mild anxiety. She couldn't imagine that Raymond had simply abandoned her. Since he had interrupted their vacation so urgently and forgotten to pay the bill, she assumed some emergency must have occurred. Yet she reasoned it couldn't be too serious, or he would have woken her to explain. After all, Marcia was his right hand, his closest confidant. She had no idea how many shocking discoveries awaited her return home. The first surprise came at her rented apartment. Her expensive designer clothes lay crumpled in bags, unceremoniously dumped in the entrance. Her key wouldn't work in the lock, which had clearly been changed. Fuming, Marcia called the landlord repeatedly, until he finally answered on the fourth try. "Why are you harassing me with calls?" he demanded. "I'm harassing you. How dare you throw out my belongings? Do you know they're worth more than this whole place? And why can't I get in?" "Stop shouting and being rude. Only paying tenants get to use the door. No rent, no apartment. Leave. And I'm going to find a proper tenant." "Just wait until my man hears about this. He'll set you straight." "Go ahead, tell him. Make sure he brings 3 months' back rent when he comes. Otherwise, I'll take you both to court. I'm not running a charity." Marcia hurled a few choice words at the landlord before hanging up. His words made no sense to her. Raymond couldn't have missed the rent payments. He was always meticulous about such things. But with his phone still off, she couldn't verify anything. The woman headed to the office, certain she'd find her lover there. Instead, she found police conducting a search. Everything after that became a blur. Marcia struggled to comprehend what the uniformed officers were saying. According to them, Raymond had taken out massive loans, accumulated staggering debts, and fled to South America with his ex-wife, having emptied both his personal and company accounts. Now, Marcia, as co-owner, would have to repay everything, or face trial and likely imprisonment. The shock left her mind reeling. Her only coherent thought was to run, but she had nowhere to go. To avoid prison, Marcia surrendered all her savings, a considerable sum, but not enough. She had to sell her car, jewellery, and even her mother's apartment, leaving the older woman without a home in her twilight years. Worse still, Marcia was pregnant. This was the news she'd planned to share with her lover in Paris. She'd built such dreams around it, imagining marriage and happiness. Now she sat empty-handed, no money, no job, no husband, no property. Though the unborn child bore no blame, she already felt hatred toward it. Now Marcia, who had recently lived an enviable life, sat in the shabby kitchen of a cramped apartment with dated furnishings, which she and her mother rented with their last funds. Trapped in this seemingly hopeless situation, her thoughts turned to Patrick. How was he? Had he healed from her betrayal? Found someone new? 2 years after their divorce, Marcia wondered if perhaps not all was lost, if her ex-husband might still love her and forgive her sins. Patrick had taken the divorce far harder than Marcia imagined. The betrayal had plunged him into deep depression. Even work brought no solace or distraction. He looked so unwell that his superiors granted him unpaid leave, despite the challenges of finding a mid-year replacement. But he was barely functioning anyway. His colleagues offered sympathetic advice, drawing from personal experience or stories of others who had weathered similar family crises. They all insisted he use his leave wisely, get away somewhere to clear his head and escape his troubles. Patrick pretended to listen, nodding in agreement, but did something entirely different. Instead of seeking a change of scenery, he locked himself in the apartment, where everything reminded him of Marcia, where her abandoned possessions lay scattered, things she deemed unnecessary in her new life. If not for a kind elderly neighbour, once a friend of his late parents, who brought him food, he might have starved to death. The old woman's heart ached for her young neighbour, whom she'd watched grow up before her eyes. She tried to bring him to his senses. "What are you doing, Patrick? You don't eat, you don't drink, you don't work, you don't go outside." "Leave me alone, Mrs. Barris. Go home and don't come back. Let me die in peace." "What's there to die for? You're young, healthy, with an apartment and a job. Are you really going to waste away here because of some worthless woman?" "Don't talk about her like that. She's still my wife, though ex." "What kind of wife is she? Just a name. She's nothing but a tramp. It's not you who should suffer. She should be ashamed for losing such a man. Mark my words, she'll come crawling back on her knees." Patrick only smirked ironically at his concerned neighbour's words, but the elderly woman persisted. Every day Mrs. Barris would go on with her admonitions to Patrick, and eventually her efforts bore fruit. One morning he woke up in an entirely different mood. The previous evening he'd gone to bed feeling worthless, but now his soul burned with anger. Why should he suffer for someone so shameless? Had he wronged her? Hadn't he carried her in his arms? Hadn't he indulged her every whim? No, this ungrateful woman wasn't even worth thinking about. With these thoughts, Patrick leaped out of bed and rushed to the kitchen. Grabbing trash bags from the closet, he darted around the apartment, collecting everything that belonged to Marcia or reminded him of her. Her makeup bag, an unfinished romance novel, bottles of expensive yet cloying perfume, a statue they'd bought on vacation. By noon, Patrick had already taken 5 full bags to the trash, but he wasn't finished. He decided to continue purging the apartment, then renovate it, so nothing would remind him of his ex-wife or any past disappointments. Mrs. Barris was a lonely pensioner bored at home. Thus, she decided to help her young neighbour, though, truthfully, she felt sorry seeing so many good things discarded. She managed to rescue a bottle of Marcia's expensive shampoo and her brand handbag from their journey to the trash. The thought of all the valuable items being thrown away made the elderly woman's blood pressure rise. She decided to take control of the entire process to ensure nothing else expensive or beautiful went to waste. At first, Mrs. Barris merely supervised quietly, but as she grew comfortable, she began acting like the mistress of the house, searching through closets, under beds, and in various hiding places. So absorbed was she in this task that she forgot her aching legs and twisted back. With surprising agility for her age, she climbed a stepladder and retrieved a large old suitcase from the mezzanine. Upon opening it, Mrs. Barris felt disappointed. Nothing worth salvaging inside. "Patrick, we can throw out this suitcase without even looking. It's just junk." "What is it, Mrs. Barris? Let me see." "Just some ancient papers." "This isn't junk. It's treasure. Give it back. You can't throw this away, not under any circumstances." "He's a really strange man," she thought. He'd thrown away expensive French perfume and silk scarves, yet here he was, pining over old papers. He must have truly lost his mind after the divorce. He was completely absorbed in reverently turning the pages of old, yellowed notebooks filled with scrawled handwriting. Back in his school days, he'd written down songs he'd composed, along with their guitar chords. When he'd been forced to abandon his dreams of a musical future, he had angrily stashed these notebooks away somewhere and forgotten about them. He had assumed that they were lost during various apartment renovations and reorganizations. But his mother had preserved them, carefully storing them in a suitcase alongside his school diaries and first notebooks, precious memories of her son. For the next few days, Patrick again remained housebound. Once more, he forgot about food and sleep, but this time not from grief. From morning until evening, he sat hunched over his notebooks, reading, rereading, correcting, and rewriting. Mrs. Barris watched her neighbour with growing concern, genuinely worried about his mental health. When the courier arrived with the guitar from the online store, the woman delivered her verdict. "Well, that's it, Patrick. You've finally lost your mind." "What makes you think that, Mrs. Barris?" "Not only do you spend all day scribbling in those notebooks, but now you've brought this contraption into the house. What do you need it for? To keep me awake at all hours?" "I've been remembering my youth. I loved music so much, wrote songs, dreamed of performing on stage. How could I have known I'd end up such a failure? That I'd waste my life at a job I hated, only to have my wife leave me for another man." "Enough wallowing. Play your guitar if it helps, but don't stay up too late, or we'll have problems." "Don't worry, Mrs. Barris. I'll probably return the guitar tomorrow and throw out these notebooks. Who needs these songs now? My train has left the station." Patrick sighed heavily and turned to face the window. The elderly neighbour, at a loss for words of comfort, sat quietly for a moment before deciding to leave him alone with his thoughts. She had almost crossed the threshold when she suddenly tapped her forehead, remembering something. She returned to the living room and said, "Listen, Patrick, there are these people who make videos and post them on the internet." "You mean bloggers?" "Yes, that's it, bloggers. I don't watch such nonsense myself, but my friend has gone completely crazy in her old age. She watches them all day and keeps sending them to me. It's so annoying. I don't know how to stop her without hurting her feelings. But here's what I'm thinking. Why don't you try doing what those bloggers do? Sing your songs and put them online. Let people listen." "Come on, it's not that simple. I'd probably just get mocked." "Well, I've pitched the idea. Do what you want. But remember, it's better to regret what you've done than what you haven't done." When Mrs. Barris left, Patrick smiled and shook his head sceptically. Though touched by his elderly neighbour's concern, he considered her suggestion unrealistic. First, simply posting videos online wasn't enough. You needed to handle promotion and advertising, things he knew nothing about. Second, he was convinced no one would like his music or songs. People would laugh, and if Marcia saw it, that would be unbearable. No, he'd endured enough hardship. He wouldn't humiliate himself. Having mentally dismissed the idea, Patrick finished his coffee and went to bed. Sleep, however, proved elusive. He tossed and turned all night, blaming his insomnia on that last cup of coffee. He had sworn countless times not to drink coffee at night, yet here he was. But of course, coffee wasn't the real culprit. It was Mrs. Barris's fault for planting the idea of pursuing music again. Who had asked for her opinion? He had been living quietly, bothering no one, peacefully nursing his unfulfilled dreams. Then this progressive old lady had to come along and stir up his soul. Until dawn, Patrick invented reasons why he shouldn't pursue music or share it online. But if he was honest, all his arguments were weak, mere excuses masking his fear, laziness, and insecurity. The truth was, Patrick no longer had strict parents to answer to, no one to blame for his broken dreams. Years ago, he could have shown backbone and stood his ground, but he hadn't. Now, his cowardice and indecision were his alone to own. If he didn't try now, he'd spend the rest of his life regretting it. Only when daylight began creeping in did Patrick finally end his internal debate and decide to try. At last, he could sleep. While night had brought doubt, morning brought fierce enthusiasm. He wanted to start immediately, though he wasn't sure where to begin. He propped his phone against a sugar bowl, played and sang one verse. The result disappointed him. Years without practice had left his hands stiff and his voice rusty. Then there were the technical challenges, sound quality, lighting, video production, and more. For a moment his spirits sank, but he quickly rallied. Perhaps for the first time in his life, he overcame his weakness and self-doubt. He spent a month preparing to shoot and post his first proper video. He practiced constantly, polishing his compositions while learning about video production. He studied blogging and online promotion. Though nervous, he didn't expect success. He mentally prepared for failure, deciding in advance not to let it devastate him. The main thing is that he finally tried, and this topic would be closed forever. Meanwhile, Mrs. Barris, who had been supporting Patrick morally and helping him around the house all this time, remained optimistic. She was certain that success awaited her neighbour. She was the first to like and write an enthusiastic comment on his video. She even asked her tech-savvy friend, the one who had taught her about bloggers, for help, though it turned out to be unnecessary. Patrick's video reached hundreds of views on the first day, and by the next day, the count had risen to thousands. While there was some criticism, the vast majority of viewers loved the song, as did its performer. The success caught Patrick off guard, leaving him unsure how to proceed. Mrs. Barris insisted he must continue, and he didn't argue. He no longer dwelled on his job change or divorce. There was no time for suffering. All his spare time went to his newfound passion. Soon he had amassed quite a following. The blog even started generating some income, modest at first, but it was just the beginning. Before long, Patrick was performing at corporate events and club concerts. His songs made it to radio airplay. He had become something of a local celebrity. His popularity grew so much that he finally resigned from his unfulfilling job to pursue music full-time, just as he had dreamed of in childhood. Now that his life was finally improving, seeing Marcia was the last thing he wanted. But the selfish, calculating woman gave little thought to her former husband's feelings. She had her own problems to solve, When Marcia inquired about Patrick, she felt slightly offended. She had expected her abandoned spouse to be completely devastated without her. Instead, he had flourished. His success wounded Marcia's ego, yet she saw how this situation could work in her favour. After all, she was jobless. Who could hire a pregnant woman? She was content knowing her ex-spouse would support both her and the future child. She had planned everything meticulously, even considering he might reject her. Marcia avoided calling Patrick, fearing he might ignore her. She decided a face-to-face meeting would be better. Surely then he couldn't resist her. Having discovered which bar her ex-husband was performing at, Marcia dressed up and arrived near the end of his concert. Patrick was shocked to see her, initially assuming she had come with her lover. Therefore, he was surprised to realize she had come alone, and apparently for him. Marcia approached Patrick with a radiant smile, as if nothing had happened. She moved to hug and kiss his cheek, but stopped when she saw him instinctively recoil. "Hello, Patrick. I'm so glad to see you. I can't believe that we haven't seen you for 2 whole years. You've changed so much in that time." "Have I?" "Yes," Marcia nodded with a gentle smile. "And you haven't changed at all." Patrick blurted out the first thought that came to his mind. "I hope it's a compliment to my blooming appearance and not some kind of tease." "Okay, Marcia. I don't have time to talk to you, and someone's probably waiting for you." "No, he isn't. Nobody's waiting for me." "You've already started clubbing on your own? What does your boyfriend think of that?" "Nothing. He's not my boyfriend anymore. I left him, and it's all for the best." "Well, good luck to you. I gotta go," Patrick said and turned to leave. "Oh, wait a minute. Where are you trying to run off to? I came to see you on purpose." "Me?" "Yes. We need to have a serious talk." Actually, Patrick didn't want to talk to Marcia, expecting nothing good from her. Common sense told him to turn around and leave, but curiosity won out. He wondered what could have happened to make the proud and arrogant Marcia, who had always looked down on him, come crawling back, just as Mrs. Barris had predicted. So Patrick invited his ex-wife to a vacant table and looked at her questioningly. He noticed her nervous demeanour. She tried hard to maintain composure, but was visibly anxious. "Marcia, if you came to sit in silence, I have absolutely no time." "You've become so busy. Not like before." "I don't have the slightest desire to reminisce about what used to be. Tell me why you're here, and we'll go our separate ways." "I've been thinking about the old days a lot lately, and I don't want to run off in different directions." "What are you implying?" "Why don't we try starting over?" "I knew this conversation wouldn't lead to anything good," said Patrick, getting up. "Wait, Patrick, don't jump to conclusions. You understand, we're not the same. And from now on, we'll be entirely different. From now on, we'll be happy. Besides, there's something that's going to change our lives." "I don't understand. What are you driving at?" "I'm pregnant, Patrick. We're going to be parents." "Marcia, do you have a fever? We've been apart for 2 years. You can't seriously expect to pin this child on me." "Of course I didn't mean it in that way. I'm just speaking from pure emotion. Of course it's not yours. But what does that matter? You've always dreamed of having children. I'm sure you'll be the best father for him." "How clever of you. What a brilliant plan. You're going to land yourself on my shoulders and have a father for your child. How fortunate to have such a fool in your pocket, who can be used at will." "Patrick, you've misunderstood everything. I love you." "That's enough, Marcia. I'm not the same fool as before. While I feel sorry for your child, I cannot help you. Please, don't contact me again." Patrick hurriedly left, shocked by her audacity. How could he have loved this woman? How could he have married her? Had he been blind to how manipulative and calculating his ex-wife was? How could she imagine he would welcome her back with open arms, along with another man's child? Even if she wasn't pregnant, Patrick wouldn't give her a second chance. As they say, never step into the same river twice. Once a betrayer, always a betrayer. Besides, Patrick's heart belonged to another now. Music had given him not just a new life, but new love. At one of his concerts, he'd met a woman and fallen in love at first sight, someone he dreamed of spending his life with. Marcia trembled with rage. Who did he think he was? How dare he speak to her that way? What had happened to that puppet she once controlled so easily? Her pride was wounded. She had planned everything so carefully, imagined how perfectly her future would unfold, and simply couldn't accept her plans crumbling. When she told her mother everything at home, the young woman faced harsh criticism. "How did I raise such a foolish daughter, with bird brains? You couldn't even manipulate this simpleton into marriage. What went wrong? He clearly hasn't forgiven you. You shouldn't have mentioned the baby right away. You're a woman. You need to be craftier. You should have won him back first, then brought it up. What a mess. He used to want children so desperately, was so persistent about it. I thought he'd be thrilled." "Of course not. Even someone as gullible as your Patrick wouldn't willingly accept such a burden. Face it, you've lost. You've lost everything and robbed me of my only security in my old age. Are we all supposed to live in rental apartments now with a baby? No, Mum, don't worry. I won't give up." Marcia didn't share her mother's pessimism, though she might have been overconfident. She was convinced this wasn't the end. Such deep love as Patrick had for her couldn't simply vanish. Surely a spark remained, and from that spark she could reignite the flame. She just needed patience and persistence. She decided to observe her ex-husband discreetly. She wanted to understand his current life, his routines, his social circle, to develop a strategy. But her surveillance led to unexpected discoveries. Where does a typical man spend his weekend mornings? Some sleep until noon, others jog, meet friends, or shop. Yet Patrick went to an amusement park, an odd choice for a man in his 40s. His behaviour suggested he was waiting for someone. He paced anxiously, checking his watch repeatedly. Clearly he had an appointment, and whoever it was seemed to be running late. Suddenly, his face lit up with joy. Marcia froze as a laughing 5-year-old girl ran to Patrick. He scooped her up in his arms as she squealed with delight. A moment later, a young woman, dressed far too simply by Marcia's standards, joined them. She kissed Patrick, and the happy trio headed toward the Ferris wheel. Though Marcia couldn't make out her rival's features from afar, she didn't need to. Who was this nobody to stand in her way? How could Patrick prefer some plain Jane when he could have her? Blood rushed to Marcia's head. Blind with fury, she pushed through the crowd, grabbed Patrick's elbow, and began shouting throughout the park. "That's how it is. That's why you rejected me." "Marcia, what do you think you're doing? Where did you come from?" "Shut up. You're in no position to ask questions. I left my pride and crawled to him on my knees, and he found someone else." "Don't shout. Don't embarrass yourself. Everyone's looking at us. You're scaring the child." "Oh yes, a child. So my baby is a stranger to you, but you hug another girl as if she were your own. Or am I missing something? Maybe you have a daughter out of wedlock. Maybe you've been lying to me all these years, leading a double life. Well, just wait until I deal with you and this... You? We? Marcia shot an angry glance at the astonished woman who, stepping aside, tried to calm her crying daughter. The woman stood frozen, looking at each other as if seeing ghosts. "It can't be. Is that you?" was all Marcia could say. In Patrick's companion she recognised Leslie, her own sister, who was 2 years her senior. It had been over 10 years since Marcia had seen or heard from her sister. She never imagined fate would bring them together under such circumstances. Leslie's story paralleled Patrick's in many ways. Like him, she had loved music from childhood and dreamed of performing on stage. She too had faced resistance from their strict parents, who insisted on a more practical profession that would guarantee stability. But there was one significant difference between them. Unlike Patrick, Leslie refused to yield to pressure. At barely 18, she ran away from home to live life on her terms and prove her worth. She dreamed of returning home triumphant years later, head held high, to share stories of her success. Leslie wanted nothing more than for her mother and sister to witness her achievements. She was certain she would become famous, with her music playing on radio and her face on TV. But these youthful dreams remained unfulfilled. Whether from insufficient talent, lack of dedication, or simple misfortune, everything went wrong from the start. Leslie failed to gain admission to music college, let alone the conservatory. The sensible choice would have been to return home, but pride prevented her. Instead, Leslie took a job as a waitress at a fast food restaurant and rented a tiny room from an elderly woman. She convinced herself these hardships were temporary, that her dreams would eventually come true. After joining an amateur band, she thought success was within reach. However, this rock group achieved little recognition. Their performances were limited to apartment parties with questionable crowds, typically ending in drunken brawls and police intervention. Leslie, never one for hooliganism, found no joy in these scenes, yet she couldn't bring herself to leave the band. Her reason for staying had little to do with artistic passion. She had fallen in love with Jake, the lead singer. Now she wondered how she ever found this coarse, lazy, rather plain male attractive. Back then, though, he seemed incredibly handsome and talented. She believed him to be her soulmate and was overjoyed when he left his girlfriend for her. Their relationship moved at lightning speed. Within 6 months they married, despite having no savings, no steady jobs, no proper income, no proper home, no family support, no security whatsoever. But this didn't deter them. They romanticized their poverty, imagining how rising from nothing would strengthen their bond. They dreamed of telling their grandchildren about overcoming adversity together. Reality proved different. In their marriage, only Leslie showed any drive or ambition. While she worked, attended music school, and maintained their modest rental, Jake drank, frequented dubious establishments, and pretended to be finding himself in creativity. He lived entirely off his wife's earnings, yet she continued loving and believing in him. Leslie's awakening came only with her pregnancy, and Jake's subsequent abandonment of it. The man, fearing responsibility, fled while his wife was at work. She never saw or heard from him again. Now, Leslie shuddered at these memories. If it hadn't been for her landlady, she would have died. The lonely old woman sympathized with her tenant, having once been in a similar situation herself. She let Leslie live in the apartment for free, and when Leslie gave birth, she babysat her daughter Linda, as if she were her own granddaughter. It was thanks to this woman's help that Leslie finished her studies and made something of herself. Having no other family, the elderly woman eventually bequeathed her only property to her tenant. Still, Leslie and her daughter lived very modestly. Working as a music teacher in an ordinary school, Leslie barely earned enough for basic needs. She couldn't remember the last time she'd bought herself new clothes. Every penny went to her child, leaving nothing for herself. Realizing she couldn't continue like this, she began taking part-time work. She played violin at weddings, sang at anniversary celebrations, and performed at nightclub concerts. At one such event, she met Patrick, who had come to their city at a fellow musician's invitation. Leslie and Patrick's relationship began as a friendship. Neither planned for anything more at first, but plans are plans, and feelings are feelings. Though they rarely saw each other and mostly communicated online, their love flourished. Though Patrick had sworn never to fall in love or marry again, he now wanted to be a reliable husband to Leslie and a caring father to her daughter. Leslie initially hesitated to accept his proposal, but decided to take the chance. If it didn't work out, well, she was no stranger to disappointment. It couldn't be worse than with Jake. Something told her Patrick could be trusted. He was a decent man, and each day proved this more clearly. Patrick seemed like a reward for all her hardships and trials. She felt certain nothing could interfere with her happiness. That's why her sudden encounter with Marcia came as a complete shock. Though Leslie had never been close to her sister and hadn't seen her in ages, she felt troubled. Patrick, what happens now? Can we really live happily as if nothing happened? Why not? What's stopping us? Well, Marcia is my sister after all. She'll suffer. Her suffering is her own fault. But if your sister, you haven't seen in 10 years, matters more than our relationship, that's your choice. Marcia quickly realized she could manipulate Leslie's sisterly feelings. She nearly succeeded and even tried involving their mother, but that backfired. Their mother pretended to support her younger daughter while having her own agenda. Daughter, don't listen to Marcia or follow her lead. She doesn't know what she's doing. She cheated on her husband, left him, ruined her life and mine, and now she's angry. But you should get married and stop worrying. As for me, I have one favor to ask. What's that? When you marry Patrick and move out, let me have your apartment. Better yet, sign it over to me. I'm too old to be living in others' spaces. After consideration, Leslie returned to Patrick and agreed not only to marry him, but to follow him anywhere. This came at the perfect time, as he'd just received a 3-year work offer abroad and wasn't sure whether to accept. Now everything fell into place. Since Marcia wouldn't leave them in peace anyway, they'd feel more settled far away. Patrick and Leslie married quietly without celebration and soon departed, leaving their past behind. Though adjusting to the new country took time, they grew to love it so much they decided to stay. They planned to remain abroad, at least until Linda finished school. They didn't look further ahead, knowing life's instability. Everything could change instantly. Why fill their heads with uncertain plans when the present was good? As for Marcia, though initially furious and cursing her sister and ex-husband as traitors, she softened after having her son. Motherhood transformed Marcia into a kinder, gentler, more compassionate person. Her mother was shocked by the changes in her daughter. Even Marcia sometimes didn't recognize herself. However, after a while, she returned to her calculating and cunning nature. One day, Marcia learned that Raymond had returned to the city, apparently doing well with a new business and plenty of money. She was tempted to appear at his office with their child and create a scandal, embarrassing him in front of his employees and business partners. Instead, Marcia restrained herself. She decided to act more strategically. Marcia found a skilled family lawyer and filed a paternity lawsuit against her former lover. When Raymond received the summons, he stormed over to confront Marcia. "What is this nonsense? What games are you playing? You had a child with who knows whom, and now you're making demands? You're nothing but a con artist." "It's only you who is a con artist here. You're a man who ran away from his debts, thinking he'd get away with it. Now it's time to pay up. Thanks to my son, I'll see you fall." "Don't count on it. Neither you nor your child will get a penny. I have the best lawyers around." Marcia burst in laughter. "I can't wait to see you and your lawyers get in the puddle. Now, get out. I'm done talking." The DNA test confirmed Raymond as the biological father of Marcia's son. She successfully sued for substantial alimony, with the court granting her demands. She also sought compensation for emotional damages in a separate proceeding. Marcia felt triumphant. She and her child were now financially secure. Moreover, the boy was heir to considerable wealth. Since Raymond had no other children, the inheritance would be his alone. Though Raymond initially protested and tried to challenge the ruling, he eventually decided this might work in his favour. He had always wanted a son, and his ex-wife couldn't have children. He began to see the situation differently, motivated by both paternal feelings and practicality. After all, he wasn't getting any younger, and now someone could care for him in his old age. He decided to reconcile with Marcia, arriving at her door with flowers and gifts for his son. "Marcia, why don't we start afresh?" "Why should we?" "We share a history. A history better forgotten. I know I hurt you, but we could move past it for the child's sake." "I won't forget anything, even for the baby." "A boy needs his father." "He doesn't need a father who might betray and abandon him again. I'll find him a better daddy." Eventually, Raymond persuaded Marcia to marry him, but their happiness was short-lived. During their 2-year marriage, Marcia cleverly amassed a considerable sum in her bank account. Then she filed for divorce and successfully claimed half his assets in the settlement. Though Raymond regretted the financial loss, he found solace in the fact that his ex-wife didn't prevent him from seeing his son. A young couple sat on a bench in an autumn park. It was already getting dark. Night came earlier with each passing day. The streetlights hadn't yet flickered on. The sky hung low, as if you could reach out and touch the leaden clouds. The park trees admired their reflections in the puddles, and they had much to be proud of. The red, yellow and brown leaves of maples, ash and aspen trees still clung to their branches, making them look elegant. The air was rich with the scents of damp earth, recent rain, wilted grass and fallen leaves. Mary McLaughlin had once read that autumn carried a heavy smell of rotting leaves. It sounded strange and unpleasant, yet it felt wonderful. Mary drew in the autumn scent deeply, filling her lungs. She had always loved autumn. There was a special cosy romance to it. The way leaves rustled and crunched underfoot. How store counters overflowed with bright pumpkins and figs. The house owners brought in plums, apples and pears from their gardens, eagerly sharing their excess zucchini. Mushroom hunters returned with baskets full of porcini and chanterelles. Mary loved baking fragrant apple pies this time of year, adding cinnamon, vanilla, and her secret ingredient, love. She enjoyed watching old romantic comedies with Julia Roberts or Jennifer Lopez, or better yet, curling up in a plaid blanket with Jane Austen novels. Mary also cherished her walks, watching people transform as they pulled out plaid scarves, coats and trench coats from their closets. In winter, the city's inhabitants thought only of warmth and comfort. Bundling up in down jackets and funny hats, but in autumn they still allowed themselves to be beautiful. Mary wore a lovely coat herself. She'd found it last spring at a sale, heavily discounted, blue with turquoise speckles, the last one left and miraculously in her size. It seemed meant for her. After bringing it home, she'd spent ages admiring herself in the mirror. When her older sister saw her, she laughed, saying Mary looked like a quail's egg painted for Easter. But Susan quickly added that it suited her beautifully. Mary had imagined herself walking through autumn puddles, everyone else in brown, grey and black, while she'd be gloriously speckled, bright and beautiful. Yet today, wearing it on her date with her fiancé, she felt no joy. Perhaps she was simply too tired to feel anything at all. Now, after a mere half-hour walk in the nearby park, Mary and Dylan sat on a bench, each holding a coffee cup. They sat in silence. Dylan had already shared his news, and Mary had nothing to report. Her life had become Groundhog Day, and while Dylan seemed unwilling to discuss her sister, or so Mary thought, he suddenly spoke. "You know, Mary, it's not fair." Dylan broke the silence. "What exactly?" Mary furrowed her brow. "Everything that's happening." He nodded toward the autumn park, where leaves danced along the paths. "Look, I stayed quiet while you were going through the tragedy. I was there for you. But it's been 6 months. Nothing's changed." Mary understood his meaning. A cold stab of pain shot through her chest. "Dylan, sorry, but what exactly should have changed?" she asked, maintaining her composure. "My sister, who's confined to a wheelchair, should have jumped up and run? What did you expect? I've been honest with you from the start. My older sister is disabled. That's a fact. It can't change. There's no cure, no magic pill to grow her new legs." The young woman's voice dripped with sarcasm. Dylan's frown deepened as he stared at his unfinished cold coffee. "I thought this was temporary. I thought our relationship would go back to normal. We should be planning our wedding by now, talking about kids, moving in together. And instead, now the wedding's on hold. I see you once a week if I'm lucky. You're always tired, always worried about your sister. You have no time for me. What if we had kids? Would you just fall apart?" The man paused, took a sip of coffee and wrinkled his nose at the taste. He jumped up, poured the rest of the drink into the bushes, and threw the cup into the trash. He didn't sit back down on the bench, but began to march back and forth, muttering about everything that had come up. "Think of yourself. You're 25. You've taken on too much. Mary, now you're running around like a squirrel in a wheel. You don't have time to live. You're running to school early in the morning, then giving private lessons to rich brats who don't even like music. All this just to pay for your sister's day caregiver and medication. You cook at night, take care of her yourself. And so it goes on and on. Aren't you tired? It's a lifetime." Mary shivered as if blown by the wind, though it was quiet outside. "I don't understand." Mary's voice sounded distracted, her thoughts coming with difficulty, probably from sleeplessness. "What are you suggesting, Dylan? Give up on—" The word "not fair" kept beating in her head. What did he know about fairness? Tall, healthy, raised in a full and happy family. What did he know? Nothing. That's why he couldn't understand her. The man took a deep breath and exhaled. "You know, Mary, I'm sorry, but—" Dylan blurted out, avoiding his bride's eyes. "I didn't sign up for this. Put your sister in some hospital or nursing home. Otherwise, we're through." Mary didn't flinch, didn't even blink. She was so tired, so exhausted, that she didn't have the strength to cry or despair. Besides, She knew this would happen. Knew from the moment Dylan stopped coming to her house. Knew when he began looking at her older sister with dislike, even disgust. Of course, Dylan tried to hide his emotions, but he wasn't very good at it. "Okay," Mary nodded. "You're right. Let's break up." Dylan pressed his lips together. Those beautiful, full lips that Mary had loved to see smile, had loved when they kissed her cheeks in the morning. Now they belonged to a stranger. His expression had become somehow childish, ridiculous. Dylan had lost all vestiges of masculinity, transforming into a disgruntled, hurt child. "Are you sure? Are you choosing her, not me?" the man demanded. Mary sighed, taking a sip of coffee. She'd chosen a seasonal drink offered by the smiling barrister, a cappuccino with maple syrup. It was very sweet. Mary licked her lips. "You know, I don't really have a choice," she said softly. "She's my sister. She's the person who raised me, nurtured me as a child, held me in her arms, was beside me all my life. All my life, Dylan. She's my blood, my flesh, the closest person I have. Everything I am now is because of her. You are essentially nothing to me, Dylan." The man recoiled, his cheeks reddening. "Mary, I proposed to you. I could have been your husband, the father of your children. We'd have been a family. I really loved you," Dylan said tearfully, intentionally or not using the word loved in the past tense. Mary sipped her coffee again. She used the drink as an opportunity to consider her answer, to pause. She didn't want to hurt her fiancé, pardon, ex-fiancé. But she was also hurt, offended, and it was difficult to suppress. "No, you couldn't have," Mary said, picking at the sticker on the cardboard cup with her short fingernail. "I have to trust my husband, Dylan. How do the registry office workers say before sending a ship of love into the sea of life? Do you agree to be together for better and for worse, in health and in sickness? It seems our ship of love has crashed on the rocks of difficulties before even leaving the dock, Dylan. But you know what? It's good. Because if we had children, or if something like this happened to me, could I count on your help? Now it seems to me that no." "You'd be my family, like our children. I would give you everything." Dylan rushed to defend his honour. "And your sister? She's nothing to me. I don't want to be responsible for someone else's life forever, or support her. I'm not a charity for the disabled." Dylan's words sounded crude. Mary frowned, clutching her cup with chilled fingers. She took the last sip and stood up too. "You know, I never asked you to do that. I've never even asked you to take the wheelchair down from the floor. And you never offered." The former lovers looked at each other. Dylan did not recognize his cheerful romantic bride in the pale woman with circles under her eyes. Mary did not recognize her fiancé in the embittered man before her. "I think there's no point in discussing anything else, Dylan." Mary shook her head. "I don't want to clarify our relationship either. We're talking about something I cannot change. I will never leave my sister. I won't give up on her. If you truly knew me, you would understand immediately." Mary threw the glass aside. She slipped off her engagement ring, pressed it into Dylan's hand, and walked away. Dylan remained rooted to the spot, his angry gaze burning into her back. "Mary, you'll come to your senses," he shouted. "When you're left alone with your sister, living as two old maids, you'll remember me, but it'll be too late. No one will accept you with an invalid. She'll be your burden for life." Mary didn't turn around. She walked leisurely down the park street, hands tucked in the large pockets of her marvellous coat. Ahead of her, as if lighting her path, the street lights flickered on one by one. They made a strange sound, like chirping grasshoppers, before flaring up. Mary took this as a good sign. Some would say it all began with a rainy spring day and a traffic accident that divided the sisters' lives into before and after. Susan was confined to a wheelchair, and Mary became her sister's caregiver. But no, the story began even earlier, with Mary's birth. She was born into a broken, incomplete family, never knowing her father. He was likely one of her mother's drinking companions. The girl's mother drank herself to death after losing her first husband. Susan was perhaps luckier than her younger sister. She still remembered life in a happy, loving family, eating tasty milk porridge for breakfast, riding on father's shoulders, listening to bedtime stories. Yet Susan also knew the pain of losing everything. Their father fell ill and passed away. Their mother couldn't handle the grief. First came the hospital stays and medication. At home, she sought the peace at the bottle of a bottle. Helen McLaughlin began drinking on weekends. She worked at a store, 2 days on, 2 days off. Soon she started drinking in the evenings after work. Then she began showing up at work smelling of alcohol. Her boss, understanding her situation, tolerated it for a while before finally laying her off. Helen survived on widows and unemployment benefits, sinking deeper into despair. People saw that Susan's mother was drinking. Teachers noticed too, but stayed silent. No one intervened to help Susan. After all, she was clothed, fed, and living with her mother. Even such a mother seemed better than an orphanage. Truth be told, Helen loved her daughter in her own way. In her sober moments, she'd braid her unkempt hair into a bun, try to care for Susan, and show interest in her studies. They'd bake pies together. Susan would believe everything had changed, until she'd come home from school, spot unfamiliar shoes by the door, smell tobacco, and hear laughter from the kitchen. Then her mother would transform back into a monster, slurring her words, wearing that strange, ridiculous smile, with flushed cheeks and glassy eyes. Then came Mary, small and sweet as a doll. Susan loved her instantly, wholly, taking her under her wing despite being a child herself. At just 10 years old, but she was already behaving like a real mother. In truth, she became Mary's mother. As Susan grew older, her greatest fear was that they'd be sent to an orphanage. If anyone realized how badly they lived, the sisters would be separated. It was obvious that someone would definitely adopt tiny, sweet Mary, but no one would take the older Susan. That's why Susan always protected her mother. Whenever inspection authorities were coming, she cleaned the house, disposed of cigarette butts and empty bottles, and aired out unpleasant odours through open windows. Hope occasionally tried to pull herself together. She even looked for work, but never kept a job for long. When things got really bad, the sisters would cuddle together in bed and dream. Mary would whisper to her sister, "When I grow up, I want to sing or play the piano or violin. I love music so much. Though I also love our teacher. She's so sweet. I want to teach children too. What should I choose?" "Why choose? You can teach children music," Susan encouraged her younger sister. Susan praised her little sister for loving such wonderful things, then shared her own dream. "And I want a house, a big house filled with people, but not the kind who visit Mummy, you know," the eldest sister confided. "I want my family to live there, people close to me, my husband, my children, maybe when I'm old, my grandchildren too, and the children's voices will echo through it always." Mary frowned. "Will I be there?" the child asked. Susan smiled broadly and sincerely, tickling her little sister. "Of course you will. Of course you will. If you want to spend your life with your sister when you grow up." Hope passed away when Susan was 19. By then she had already been working at a nearby store since finishing school, having foregone higher education. Susan took custody of Mary. People fussed and pitied them, overwhelming Susan with concern. "It will be hard for you," they said. But Susan stayed quiet. She knew the bitter truth. When their mother was gone, life actually became easier for her and her sister. Susan was responsible and hard-working. She quickly advanced from cashier to administrator, and within just a year became senior administrator. Susan studied extensively, immersed herself in the business, and eventually earned an interview for the store manager position. As her career flourished, Susan remained both mother and sister to Mary. Recognizing her sister's love for music early on, Susan enrolled her in free piano lessons at school. Mary's talent immediately shone through, impressing her teacher. When Mary graduated, it was her sister who embraced her at the ceremony, who paid for her hairstyling and prom dress, who worried as she applied to the conservatory. She even accompanied Mary to her interview and subsequent creative and professional tests, waiting anxiously in the hallway. Mary found success, though not as the next Mozart. She became a music teacher and gave private lessons, earning a comfortable living. She even composed her own pieces, though she rarely shared them. Their small family then faced a new chapter. Susan married Jake. Mary served as bridesmaid and played Mendelssohn's Wedding March as the couple walked down the aisle. She couldn't hold back her tears of joy, hoping her wonderful sister had found happiness. Mary remained in their mother's apartment, which Susan had renovated, while the newlywed moved in with her husband. Then Mary met Dylan. It seemed the sisters' dark days had ended, replaced by brighter ones. But this was merely the calm before the storm. That night Susan and Jake visited friends at their country house. They planned to stay overnight, but Jake quarrelled with the host. He got into the car while intoxicated. Susan pleaded with him, tried to dissuade him, offered to call a taxi, but Jake lost his temper, shouting at his wife to get in the car and leave with him. Later, Susan realized that Jake had reminded her of her mother at that moment. The fear overwhelmed her reason, and she got in. Jake lost control of the vehicle. He was lucky, escaping with mere scratches. Susan wasn't as fortunate. While her friends expressed sympathy for her tragedy, they quickly disappeared from Susan's life, unwilling to deal with her circumstances. But the deepest betrayal came from her husband. He packed his belongings, bid his wife farewell, and vanished without a trace. He left a ring, divorce papers, and some barbed words. "I want a family, a full-fledged family. I don't know if you can have children, and if you can, how will you raise them? And then, you don't think I don't realize it's all my fault. I look at you and the guilt gnaws at my bones. I can't live like this. I'll go crazy if I stay," said the man. "But you do realize that the apartment is mine, right? So get out of it as soon as possible." So, Susan was left alone, or rather, she stayed with Mary again, who had taken her home the same day Jake had left. Mary was having a hard time, not because she was working more or taking care of her sister, but because Susan had closed herself off. Brave, strong, beautiful and proud, she was fading away. She sat at the window in her wheelchair and looked at the sky. Mary smiled naively, cooed, chatted with her sister, but in vain. Susan did not even smile back. And then Dylan left their lives, and at this moment Susan spoke. Returning home that fall evening, Mary took off her coat and put on a smile on her face. She said goodbye to the caregiver, learned how they had spent the day, then walked over to her sister and kissed her on the cheek. "You're quick," Susan said. "It's cold out there," Mary replied with deliberate cheerfulness. But Susan was too close to her sister not to catch the change. She squinted and looked at her sister's hand. The woman often noticed the glitter of the ring in artificial light, but now the finger was bare. "What's wrong?" she asked, sighing nervously, then covered her eyelids with humility. "It's because of me, isn't it?" "No. Don't lie to me. You don't make me feel better with this, Mary. I know it's because of me." Tears flashed on Mary's eyelashes. Mary sat down in front of her, touched her knees. "Hey, I'm not lying. It's not because of you, but because of him. Do you understand? He was the one who failed. He was cowardly. I don't care. We're not meant to be together." Susan shook her head stubbornly. "Stop it, Mary. You don't have to ruin your life. Give him back. I can manage on my own. How many people are there like that? I may not be able to walk, but I still live. It was hard at first, but now I'm getting used to it. Honestly." Mary took her sister's hands in her own, feeling how thin her fingers had become. "I'm glad to hear that you feel better, but I'm not ruining my life, okay? I'm worried about you, yes, but I'm never going to leave you, ever. And not because you've taken care of me since I was a baby, Susan. Not out of pity, not out of duty. Only because I love you like a sister, like a friend, like a mother." And then Susan burst into tears. She heard the words she needed. She heard that someone needed her, even a disabled person like her. Mary hugged her for a long time, stroking her trembling back, whispering words of comfort. She swore that they would get through this, and everything would be all right. When Susan calmed down, Mary brought her mint tea. The woman took the mug, warmed her palms against it, and looked around. The momentary outburst seemed to have brought her to her senses, pulled her out of her depression. Her green eyes filled with tears again. "Damn it! Honestly, I've dreamed of escaping this apartment my whole life. Despite the renovations, it hasn't changed for me. I still remember more than you do. I can't even breathe in here. And in the end, I ended up coming back here," she whispered. "It's like everything I'd accomplished has gone back to zero. A mockery of fate." Mary looked around too. Then her memory brought forth a conversation with a woman whose daughter she taught vocal and piano, and suddenly it hit her. If she and her sister were cartoon characters, a light bulb would surely appear over Mary's head. Mary opened her mouth to voice the thought that had invigorated her, made her blood boil, and then she bit her tongue. It wasn't time yet. No need to raise her sister's hopes. She'd have to find out first. That night, Mary loved autumn again. She loved it because the house began to fill with the scent of cinnamon and sugar. An apple pie appeared on the table, which they had baked together. The sisters, wrapped in the same plaid, ate it with vanilla ice cream, watched Pretty Woman, and then turned on Runaway Bride, enjoying Richard Gere's looks and feeling a little jealous of Julia Roberts' charm. And then Susan fell asleep on her shoulder, with her legs hidden by the plaid and a satisfied blush on her cheeks. She looked just like before. Mary lay awake for a long time, wondering whether she would be able to fulfill her sister's dream. It must be possible. After all, once, long ago, Mary had sacrificed everything to help Mary fulfill her dream. The next day, Susan announced that she would study online to become a web designer. I've been creating a website for a store, so I'm interested in it, and I noticed that there are free courses for people with disabilities. It's also the perfect job for me, because I'm always in a chair." She giggled over breakfast. Mary was happy looking at her sister. She only hoped that her enthusiasm would not fade too quickly. Mary went straight to Diana. The woman was surprised to see the music teacher at the door. "Do you and Angela have classes today?" she asked, dressed in her silk robe as usual. Diana was happily married and enjoyed the benefits of such a marriage. There were rumours that her husband was cheating on her, but she easily turned a blind eye to it. Perhaps the brand name, handbags and jewellery got in the way of the view. "I'm sorry I'm not here about Angela. Remember when you mentioned having a piece of land in the village? The unwanted one?" "Yes, from my grandmother." The woman nodded, wrinkling her nose. "To be honest, I can't stand that place. I remember how my mother sent me to my grandmother, and she made me work from dawn till dusk. Since then I can't even have a flower at home, unless it's artificial. The earth makes me sick, and there's a swamp nearby, with so many mosquitoes." The woman's throat was dry. "Could you sell it to me? And if possible, on credit or in instalments. I would teach your daughter for free. I would train her for competitions. Please, I really need the land." The request surprised Diana. She was essentially a kind woman, and she liked the teacher. Diana enjoyed taking her to the kitchen after class and, while pouring tea and something stronger for herself, gossiping and complaining about life. She hadn't planned to give away the land, though. "Why do you need it?" The woman frowned. Mary was frank and told everything honestly. By the end of her story, Diana could hardly hold back her tears. "You know what? Let's make a deal," she said decisively. "I'll give you that unfortunate plot with the hut. Do whatever you want with it. I'll draw up a deed of gift. And you, as we discussed, will teach music to Angela for free. At least until she loses interest." "No, I couldn't accept such a gift." "You know what? My husband buys absolutely hideous paintings at charity auctions. He says it's the way of helping people and improving the world. Can't I do something nice too? I don't even like that place, and you need it so badly. It's settled. It's yours to fix up and build on," Diana said firmly. "Now, let's go to the kitchen. I've been saving a lovely bottle of sparkling wine. This is the perfect moment. And you know, Mary, I feel strange, almost light-headed. It's been so long since I've felt such joy." Mary tried to dissuade Diana, saying she would try for a mortgage for the land and construction, but Diana wouldn't hear of it. It was clear that Diana herself was thrilled with her idea. After the paperwork was complete, Mary received the plot of land. She worked even harder to get it in order before bringing Susan there. Mary asked her sister to close her eyes, rolled her wheelchair outside the gate and said, "Open up." Susan cautiously opened her eyelids and saw a garden with bare trees and an old house. "What's this? Why have you brought me here?" she asked in surprise. Mary's chest swelled with warmth. "To our home, Susan. Our home. Here we'll build a big house. Everything will be just as you dreamed." Susan only realized she was crying when breathing became difficult and her vision blurred. But these were tears of joy. Was it hard for the sisters? Of course it was. They both worked tirelessly and invested everything in the construction. Brick by brick, they built their dream. One weekend, while the sisters were working on their plot, they met their neighbour, Nelson. He was a sailor who had bought the adjacent plot, planning to build a summer house and bathhouse there. After months at sea, he yearned for the woods and land. Nelson's dog bounded onto the sisters' plot and rushed to Susan, covering her face with kisses. The man, embarrassed, tried to quiet his affectionate dog. The woman laughed, clear and genuine. And Nelson fell in love. He fell for her pure laughter and smile, for her green eyes, the colour of summer grass. That Susan couldn't walk didn't even register to him. Was it difficult for him to carry the woman he loved in his arms? Not at all. Fate had more surprises in store. Nelson had a younger brother, Vince. When he came over for barbecue, he saw Mary bringing homemade pies to the table. Later, as they sat by the fire, he picked up a guitar, and Mary sang. Well, Vince had no chance of not falling in love. Soon the brothers were helping the sisters build their house. The fence between their plots came down, along with any other obstacles to happiness. Many years passed, and Susan's dream came true. In the garden, among apple and pear trees, stood a large and beautiful house. It was filled with people, her family, the ones closest to her heart. Her children and nephews lived there, and she knew her and her sister's grandchildren would too. Children's voices would echo within these walls for generations to come. This was where true love lived.
I know you're home. Open up now. Sheila woke up to the insistent ringing of the doorbell. Her head was buzzing, her body adamantly refusing to move. The pounding at the door seemed to echo through her feet. Sheila struggled up, clinging to the walls, and staggered to the door. She didn't bother looking through the peephole. She didn't care who was breaking into her sanctuary or why. Kelly stood outside. She was Sheila's best friend, a spectacular blonde who knew her worth. Despite the early hour, Kelly looked pert. Flawless curls, daytime makeup, a casual dress, and high heels. In Kelly's opinion, anything below 7 centimetres wasn't a proper heel, and such shoes never earned her respect. Her definition of low was 7 to 8 centimetres. I've been calling you since yesterday. Kelly launched into attack as she entered the hallway. Fine, during the week you're tired from work and want to sleep early, but yesterday was Friday. You could have chatted a bit. Or did that man of yours finally forbid you to talk to me? Hey, Brock, are you playing domestic tyrant now? Afraid that under my guidance Sheila might leave you? No, Kelly, Sheila said tiredly, sinking onto a kitchen stool. He left me. What? Kelly couldn't believe her ears. That nerdy and boring Brock dared to leave my dear Sheila just like that? From their first meeting, Kelly had disliked Brock. Smooth-talking, with his sickeningly sweet smile and ingratiating voice, he never earned her trust. But Sheila had fallen in love. Within weeks of meeting, Brock had moved into Sheila's apartment and started using her car, claiming his was being repaired. His job remained mysterious. By his account, he was a high-level executive struggling to save his company from bankruptcy. However, Sheila never saw much money from him. What does it matter who provides for the family? The main thing is that we love each other, she would say. Yet Brock, while living in Sheila's apartment, driving her car and enjoying her financial support, showed no hurry to propose. When Kelly directly asked about wedding plans, Brock hugged Sheila and smoothly replied, A marriage stamp means nothing. Sure, we could sign the papers if it's urgent. Actually, I planned to formalize our relationship somewhere in Bali or the Mediterranean, do it properly. But first, I need to rescue my company from this crisis so it can generate proper income. Of course, Kelly, if you're eager to celebrate my and Sheila's wedding now, we can do whatever to satisfy you. Though
I can't promise restaurants and champagne-filled limousines. At most, a festive dinner at home."
Sheila, gazing at Brock with puppy-dog devotion throughout his speech, fervently assured him she would wait, agreeing that official marriage meant nothing. Love was everything. Kelly couldn't believe her eyes and ears. How could Sheila, her brilliant university friend, who had graduated with honours and become one of their company's most valuable specialists, fall for this obvious conman? Kelly played her final card. "Sheila's an excellent economist. Perhaps she could help resolve your company's crisis." She noticed Brock's momentary hesitation before he recovered.
"Kelly, I try not to burden dear Sheila with my problems. She has enough stress at your workplace. Better she rests after work."
And there was that devoted, loving look in Sheila's eyes again. Rest, Kelly thought on her way home. Cleaning, washing, ironing, cooking. Really, what a rest. After that conversation, the friends rarely met outside work. Their cafe visits and shopping trips ceased entirely. Even at work, Sheila avoided Kelly. When asked how she was doing, she'd simply reply, "I'm fine. I'll make coffee, and you can tell me everything. Take a bath first," Kelly said, taking charge of the situation. Sheila obeyed, returning noticeably refreshed to find coffee waiting. "Tell me everything," Kelly demanded impatiently. The previous Sunday, Brock had been out all day, which had become usual lately, even on weekends. He returned at midnight and immediately began packing his suitcase. Sheila watched, bewildered. After packing, Brock offered his explanation. "Forgive me, our meeting was a mistake. I've met someone else and realised we're not meant to be together." With that, he left Sheila standing there stunned. Surprisingly, Sheila did not leave her sanity, and deciding that she would think about it tomorrow, she went to bed. All week she'd pushed thoughts of Brock away, going straight to bed after work and forbidding herself to think about him during working hours. Yesterday, finally home after the long week, she let her emotions surface. She remembered, cried, questioned what she'd done wrong, cried more, and kept asking, why? Come morning, exhausted from tears and worry, she'd fallen into troubled sleep, only to be awakened by a concerned Kelly. Kelly, tired of trying to restore the old relationship with her friend and realizing it wouldn't be possible to resolve things during the workdays, decided to act directly. After spending all night trying to reach Sheila by phone, she rushed to her home and found her friend in a pitiful state. God, who needed that weirdo? What kind of fool would fall for him? Though, considering Sheila did, thought Kelly, then said aloud, "Come on, let's go make you look fabulous." "I don't want to go anywhere," Sheila protested. "I'm not asking if you want or not. Get yourself cleaned up and let's go." "Where?" "Where all sensible girls go to relieve stress. To the salon, shopping and a restaurant. You and your Brock have completely neglected yourself. You look like an exhausted mother of 8. Sheila reluctantly got dressed and followed Kelly. At the shopping centre, Kelly wouldn't rest until she'd led Sheila through every boutique. At first, Sheila was reluctant to try on the clothes chosen for her by Kelly, but gradually she forgot her misfortune and got involved in shopping. Exhausted afterward, the girls went to a restaurant for lunch. "I'm so tired," Sheila complained. "I hope this is the end of your reboot program." Kelly, looking as fresh as if she hadn't spent hours walking the mall in heels, gave her friend a puzzled look. "What do you mean, the end? We haven't even started yet." Seeing Sheila's shudder of protest, she quickly added, "Don't worry, it gets physically easier from here. We're going to the beauty salon." At the salon, Sheila finally relaxed and rested. "Now you look human again," Kelly exclaimed, approvingly examining her friend after the treatments. Sheila liked her reflection too. Instead of a middle-aged woman with undefined hair colour and a shapeless hairstyle, a young woman
with luxurious blue-black curls, gazed back at her. "Just clothes and makeup left," said Kelly, satisfied with the transformation. The friends arrived at Sheila's house that evening. "We must celebrate." Kelly produced a bottle of champagne. Sheila brought out glasses. They clinked and took a few sips. The bubbles went pleasantly to Sheila's head, dulling her sense of loss and betrayal. She thought that eventually she'd be able to forget Brock. "You don't need any time for this," Kelly said, as if reading her thoughts. Looking straight into Sheila's eyes, she declared, "We're yanking him out of your head and heart right now. Today. Get dressed up." "But where? It's late." Sheila stared at her friend in amazement. "Saturday, 8 p.m. is late. You're not dead yet, dear. Go get dressed." At Kelly's commanding tone, Sheila obediently stood and went to her closet. "The new red dress and those suede shoes you bought today," Kelly directed. She applied Sheila's makeup and turned her toward the mirror approvingly. While Sheila stood speechless before her reflection, Kelly changed clothes and did her own makeup. "Stunning," Kelly said with approval. And the girls went to the city's most fashionable club.
"Oh, what a bore. Not a soul worth looking at."
Richard yawned dramatically.
"Come on, settle down. We're just here for drinks and relaxation. Let's skip the female attention tonight, shall we?"
Leo gave his friend a paternal look.
"One doesn't prevent the other."
Richard suddenly froze, eyes wide, mouth agape.
"No way!"
Leo followed his friend's gaze to the club entrance, where two stunning women were speaking with the administrator, who eventually showed them to a free table.
"Leo," Richard said, eyes still bulging, "I hope you realize we can't let them pass us by." "Wait, you really think girls like that came alone?"
"Let's find out." Richard rushed to their table, leaving Leo no choice but to follow.
"Hi, might two humble vagabonds join your company?"
Richard bowed theatrically. "Well, if these vagabonds have honourable intentions," the green-eyed blonde replied in kind.
"How could you doubt us? We'll do anything to earn the good opinion of such fine ladies."
"Then be welcome." Throughout this exchange, Leo struggled to maintain his composure. His attention was completely captured by the blonde's companion. The beautiful brunette seemed to have stepped from the pages of an Arabian fairy tale. Long black curls framed her lovely face, bottomless blue eyes sparkled like jewels, and her figure's graceful curves held an irresistible allure.
"It doesn't work like that. Girls like that are probably from show business and know how to make themselves look stunning."
He calmed himself mentally, but couldn't tear his gaze away from his new acquaintance. The young man sat down at the table, and under the blonde's guidance, they placed their order. As they shared drinks, the initial tension melted away. They joked freely, and the girls turned out to be delightfully easy to talk to. Within an hour, it felt as if they'd known each other forever. "So, what do you think of our new friends?" Kelly couldn't wait to hear Sheila's thoughts about Leo's constant attention. The girls had stepped into the restroom to powder their noses. "You know, they're quite nice," Sheila said, feeling like a femme fatale under Leo's gaze. No man had ever looked at her quite like that before, with such a mix of admiration, desire, and shyness in his eyes. "Do you think if I—" "Don't even think about it twice. Well, actually, go for it." Kelly read her friend's thoughts again. "They're out-of-towners anyway. Who cares what he thinks of you? The important thing is that you'll forget that jerk Brock and think about Leo instead," Sheila interrupted. "One night won't give you enough feelings to start pining over a new man. Just relax and enjoy." The wine had gone to Sheila's head as she danced in Leo's arms, yearning for his kiss. They barely left the dance floor, while the DJ seemed to play nothing but slow songs. Leo was losing his mind. Though his embrace remained gentle and tender, inside he was burning with desire to hold her closer, to kiss her until she wanted him as much as he wanted her. When the dance ended, Leo needed some air to cool himself. "I want to step outside, it's getting stuffy in here," he said to Sheila. She glanced at the table where Kelly and Richard were completely absorbed in each other, then replied, "If you don't mind, I'll join you." Leo agreed with pleasure, and they walked out into the cool night. At the corner of the club, Sheila shivered in the cold. Leo immediately slipped off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. As he held his hands on her shoulders for a moment, Sheila looked up and met his gaze. Suddenly, everything around them, the club, the occasional passers-by, other club-goers taking air, the entire city, vanished. Only they existed. The world had become theirs alone. Sheila's memories grew hazy after that. Leo hailing a cab, their kisses in the back seat on the way to his hotel, their eager rush to his room. But once there, time seemed to slow, each moment etched in exquisite detail. Sheila had returned from Leo's early morning, showered and fallen straight into bed. She slept until evening, when the phone woke her. "Sheila, I'm in your driveway. Put the kettle on. I'm coming up," Kelly ordered in her typical persistent way. "Tell me everything," Kelly exclaimed, perched on the couch, as Sheila prepared tea, eager to hear about her Saturday adventure. After sharing the details, Sheila concluded, "Then I asked him not to bother seeing me home, and I left. I hope you're over Brock now. Maybe something could work out with Leo." "I doubt it. They're only here for a week on business. Besides, men don't usually want serious relationships with women who sleep with them on the first date, so I have no regrets. Leo is wonderful and attentive, perhaps in different circumstances, but at least I've finally seen Brock for the jerk he truly is." Her phone suddenly buzzed with a delivered message. "If it weren't for your perfume on my pillow, I'd think I'd dreamed you. Can I hope to see you again?" How did he get my number? Sheila reread the message in amazement. "That was me," Kelly shrugged casually. "Well, I gave my number to Richard and he called this afternoon saying Leo wanted yours. Still think this one-night stand has no future? Maybe he just doesn't want to look for someone else during his business trip," Sheila said, stung by Kelly's words about a one-night stand. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean that unkindly." Kelly realized she'd hurt her friend. "So, what will you tell him?" "Nothing. I'm ending this before it begins. I don't want to fall for somebody only to get hurt again." Kelly decided not to argue. Better to let her friend think it through. The beginning of the working week passed in an emergency mode. Inspectors had arrived from the capital, and management bombarded Sheila with reports and documentation tasks. By Wednesday, Sheila had to develop a new economic plan for the implementation of new equipment that her company needed. And that was why the audit from head office had arrived, to allocate or deny funds for it. Sheila welcomed the intense workload as it kept her mind off the past weekend. Her evening routine became simple: shower, light dinner, then bed. Since her Saturday shopping trip, she had begun paying more attention to her appearance. No longer resembling the exhausted, worn-down woman of last week, the change didn't go unnoticed. Male colleagues began showing interest, and one even asked her on a date, which she declined with a laugh. Kelly was pleased to see Sheila taking care of herself again. After meeting Brock, makeup and stylish clothes had slowly vanished from her daily routine. Throughout these days, Leo kept texting Sheila, asking to meet and expressing how much he missed her and thought about her. But Sheila ignored his messages and declined his calls. On Wednesday, Sheila awoke feeling excited. She would present her calculations and conclusions to the auditors in a major meeting today. Sheila was confident in the work she had done. She knew she had done it perfectly. She had to work on her appearance. She had to look businesslike, but not like a blue stocking, and at the same time seductive but not vulgar, so that if the auditors had any doubts, Her feminine charm would not let them germinate. Let me introduce you to our leading economist, Sheila Olivier. Her chief gestured toward her as she entered the office. 2 men were seated before him, and at Sheila's appearance, they rose, turning to face her. I didn't know economists could be so charming. Leo's eyes sparkled with amusement. Beside him, Richard wore a cheerful smile. Let's begin, Sheila said, feigning unfamiliarity with the men. We shouldn't waste time. Leo understood and played along with her pretense. For the next 2 hours, Sheila presented her work, showing documentation and answering questions. During that time, Leo's expression shifted from amused to intrigued, then surprised, and finally admiring. Well, Sheila Olivier, I'm impressed by your work. Your calculations are flawless and raise no concerns. I believe we should approve the funding for the new equipment. Thank you. I'll leave the documents for your final review. Have a good day. With that, Sheila left the director's office. After catching her breath, she headed to her office, planning to call Kelly for an urgent lunch meeting. Got you. Leo appeared in the doorway. Why have you been avoiding me? I don't see any point in continuing such a relationship, Sheila replied bluntly. What relationship? This isn't the place to discuss our acquaintance. Sheila tried to slip past him, but found herself caught in his embrace. If you don't answer me, I'll kiss you right here and now until— Fine, you won, Sheila whispered, not wanting to draw attention. I'm going to lunch, you can join me. Perfect. So what's this relationship? You've decided not to continue? Leo gazed at Sheila thoughtfully as they sat in a nearby cafe. The waiter had just taken their order. First, there isn't one. Second, a proper relationship doesn't begin in bed. Why does that matter? Why torture ourselves waiting? To avoid judgment? We're adults. Leo's frustration showed. Ah, I get it. You just don't like me. Is that it? No, Sheila answered too quickly. You're leaving soon anyway. What's the point? We can see each other whenever possible. That's not realistic, Sheila said softly. Can we try? I've barely healed from my last relationship. You're offering something even more uncertain. Their food arrived, giving them both a moment to breathe. We're scheduled to leave Friday, but I'm staying until Sunday. Let's give it a chance. Everything on your terms. Movies, restaurants, moonlit walks. But without bed? Sheila fidgeted nervously. All right, let's try. Tonight at 8 o'clock then. Where should I pick you up? Sheila gave him her address. From that day on, they were nearly inseparable. Each evening, Leo would arrive with flowers and they'd go out together. They'd usually enjoy dinner, catch a movie, or take walks in the park. During one of their restaurant outings, Sheila spotted her Brock, dining with the daughter of a prominent local businessman. I see, he found a bigger purse, she thought indifferently, and immediately forgot about him. Brock noticed her too, and began drawing attention to himself, laughing deliberately loudly, and obsessively courting his companion. However, Sheila paid no attention to Brock's behaviour. She was completely absorbed by Leo. His gaze, full of admiration, desire, and sadness, drove her crazy. What she had feared most had happened. She was desperately in love again. Leo's attitude suggested he felt the same, but she was convinced he would forget her as soon as he left. Every evening, Leo walked her to her apartment door, kissed her tenderly and left. On their last night, she couldn't take it any more. When he was about to leave, Sheila took his hand and said, "Stay." "Are you sure?" he asked. Sheila found the strength to nod. Once again, the world around them disappeared until it was just the two of them. A week passed. Sheila sat at Kelly's house, where the girlfriends were enjoying cake and berry tea. "Feel like rebooting?" Kelly winked slyly.
No, I'm doing great. At work, at home, and in my heart. We text every day, and his messages are full of love and tenderness." Sheila sighed dreamily. She didn't see him off at the airport. She just walked him to the door, kissed him, and quietly closed it behind him. She had decided to let whatever happens, happen. She wouldn't worry if he forgot her after walking out her door. She had a new life and new concerns now. There was no time to suffer from unhappy love. That evening a message arrived. "I miss you terribly. Don't you?" She thought carefully about what to write. Not wanting to appear love-struck, she replied simply, "Me too." Now, every morning brought, "Good morning, my fairy," and every evening they shared stories about their day. Leo told her how much he missed her, how he thought about their last night and dreamed of meeting again, never to part. Sheila braced herself for when his fervour would fade and he would forget her. That's what she told Kelly. Maybe he really has feelings. What feelings? After 4 dates? He's a serious businessman and he wanted to change, to unwind. And since he's also intelligent and decent, he decided to break up with me gradually, so I wouldn't feel hurt. Oh, Sheila, once burned by coffee, now you're blowing on tap water. Something like that. And that was that. The next day was Sunday, and Sheila decided to sleep in. A phone call from Leo woke her. "Can you imagine? We have decided that purchasing, installing new equipment would be under our careful guidance. So, I'm flying out this afternoon. Dinner together? What time should I pick you up?" Sheila hesitated, surprised, then made up her mind. "You can come straight to my place." He understood, but couldn't resist teasing. "Are you that hungry?" Sheila hung up and got dressed. Her fridge was nearly empty, since she hadn't been eating much. But having invited a man over, she needed to prepare food. She headed to the nearest supermarket, taking a shortcut through the small garden behind her house that led to the service entrance where delivery trucks arrived. A grocery truck was parked there, with male voices shouting, likely the movers. As she approached, she confirmed her guess. A man, who appeared to be the manager, stood shouting at 2 unkempt workers, who ignored him while carrying boxes and arguing lazily among themselves. Sheila paid them no mind until one of the movers turned, and she recognized Brock. She quickly ducked behind the truck. So, this is Brock's fancy company and boss position. He really was lying, just living off me. I'm such an idiot. But how did that rich girl fall for him? Didn't her daddy find her a good fiancé? Sheila pondered while shopping. On her return, the truck was gone. Sheila felt relieved, hoping her ex had left. But there he was, sitting on the steps, smoking with his co-worker. He recognized her. "Sheila! Wow, so many groceries. Never noticed before that you eat so much. And you go to restaurants too. They say it's difficult to feed a man, and I see a woman eating for 3. How did I manage to live with him for almost a year?" Sheila thought angrily, then said aloud, "And I see that you raise your business from the bottom, and you have a really big car." While Brock figured out what to reply, Sheila hurried away. She prepared everything for Leo's arrival, set the table, cleaned the house, and warned Kelly not to call. Sheila dressed casually, her favourite everyday dress, light makeup, hair in a loose bun, and comfortable slippers. The doorbell rang. Leo appeared, slightly dishevelled, holding an enormous bouquet of roses. He immediately pulled her close, gave her a long kiss, and said apologetically, "I wasn't sure what you meant by coming straight to your place, but I brought my suitcase." "You understood perfectly. Come on, I'll show you your shelf. You can shower, and we'll have dinner." Leo headed for the shower, while Sheila searched for a vase. When Leo came out of the shower, she said, "Today, on the occasion of your arrival, I've set the table in the living room, but then we'll eat in the kitchen." "Good, my lady, and now
I'd like to give you a small gift." Only then did Sheila notice the oblong box in his hands. Inside was a beautiful gold watch with shiny stones instead of numbers. "I hope they're not too expensive," Sheila asked nervously. "Sheila, who cares? When I saw them I thought of you right away. Can't I give a beloved woman a gift?" That word, beloved, made Sheila dizzy, her heart pounding as if it might burst. "Come on, I'll feed you," was all she could say. They cuddled on the couch, watching a movie. It felt so natural and peaceful, as if they'd been doing this all their lives. The couch, the TV, the tender embrace. The doorbell rang, and Sheila peered through the peephole. Her heart sank. Brock stood outside the door. She returned to the room. "Is something wrong?" Leo noticed her worried face. "Yeah, but I don't want to get you involved." "Sheila, I'm already in your life, so whether you want me to or not, I'm already involved." He stood and headed to the hallway. Sheila heard the lock click open, then Brock's shouts, followed by silence. She rushed out. Leo was closing the door. "What happened?" She tried to speak calmly, but her voice trembled. Leo wrapped an arm around her and led her back to the room. "Your ex decided to return. I could tell from his suitcase, but I explained that the place was already taken. That's all." The days flew by. They took turns making breakfast before driving to work. At lunch, they visited cafes together, sometimes joined by Kelly. Evenings were spent walking, watching movies, dining out, or relaxing at home. On Saturdays, Leo would visit the market for farm-fresh produce. "Organic," he'd declare confidently. Sundays were for his home-cooked dinners, followed by cosy conversations on the couch. And then there were the nights, memories that made Sheila's head spin and heart race. She had fallen madly in love with this gentle, kind man who had become so dear to her. But this realization brought fear. Their separation approached at lightning speed, and Sheila knew it would be final. He would leave, and they would never see each other again. 3 days before his departure, Leo invited her to a restaurant. Everything seemed normal: the wine, delicious food, unhurried conversation. Yet tension hung in the air. Sheila felt it in every fibre of her being, her strength slowly ebbing away. "Sheila," Leo began, meeting her gaze, and she braced herself for the end. "In a couple of days I have to leave. My business trip is ending. I've been thinking about us for a long time. From the day we met, I knew I was in love. I thought separation, distance, or living together would cool my feelings, but they've only grown stronger. That's why I want you to come with me." He produced a small box and opened it, revealing a beautiful ring. "Sheila, will you marry me?" Sheila couldn't believe her ears, eyes, or her happiness. Only then did she realize how tense she had been all evening. Tears welled up, and words failed her. Leo took her hands in his, slipped on the ring and pressed them to his lips. Finally, she found her composure. "Leo, what about my job, my friends and relatives? How can I leave all that? I don't know anyone there except you. And where will we live?" "Let me start with your last question. We'll live at my place. I have a huge apartment that's too big for just me. I'll introduce you to my friends and family. Trust me, they'll love you. They're good, kind people. You can still see your friends and relatives. We can visit them, or they can come to us. Your job will simply change location, but I hope you won't need to worry about that soon. I want us to be a proper family." Sheila felt tears threatening again. Leo signalled for the bill, and after paying it, they stepped outside. The man wrapped an arm around Sheila's waist as they walked home,
letting her cry quietly. Finally she stopped, looked up into his eyes, and found his calm, loving gaze. "I agree." Kelly sat on Sheila's couch, sobbing as Sheila packed. "Kelly, please calm down, I'll visit you, or you can visit me. We still have phones. Aren't you happy for me?" "Of course I'm happy, but you're leaving. By the way, what about your apartment and car?" "I'll close up the apartment after disconnecting the utilities. The car will go to my father's garage. Leo's getting me a new one in the capital, so I won't need it there. Will you come to my wedding?" "How can you ask? Who else would be your bridesmaid?" Leo entered the room. "Ladies, care to try my speciality? Meat and vegetables?" The friends laughed and headed to the kitchen. The next day, a plane carried Sheila toward her new, happy life. Raphael awkwardly, but habitually, put his plastered leg aside, leaned on the windowsill and looked out into the street. Spring was raging outside. Dirty city snowdrifts were settling, shrinking, and flowing onto the road. The bright sun glared mercilessly, even through the unwashed window panes. Teenagers, sensing the warmth, had instantly thrown off their winter clothes and were walking down the street without hats, their light jackets open at the chest. Impossibly grimy cars cheerfully splashed dirty water on each other and on gawking passers-by. He glanced around to make sure none of his hospital room neighbours were present and quickly opened the window. Fresh, spring air rushed into the stuffy, heated room, intoxicating Raphael as he inhaled deeply. "Raphael?" Ben, a man well over 60, appeared instantly at the threshold, as if he'd been lying in ambush, waiting for this moment. "Started another hurricane in the ward again?" "I'm closing it, Ben," exclaimed Raphael, regretfully shutting the window. "Just ventilating a bit, it's stuffy." After spending a few more minutes of another endless day at the window, Raphael grabbed his crutches and waddled to his bed. He had been languishing in hospital confinement for 2 months now, though at least he could get out of bed and move around the ward with crutches. He had always worked as long as he could remember, never sitting still, and especially never lying on an uncomfortable bed, deciding whether his back or side ached more. He was sick to death of his mostly elderly wardmates, or cellmates, as they called themselves with attempted humour. He was fed up with their endless conversations about illnesses, fishing, and wayward grandchildren. The crossword puzzle magazine bored him. He didn't know half the words anyway. The sight of greyish soup or porridge only made him picture, with mocking clarity, a steak with golden potato wedges, or fresh pink shrimp, or anything else that made him hate the hospital food even more. Then the early, unexpectedly swift spring descended on the city, promising renewal, joy and freedom from snow, heavy clothes and cold. It called out to live joyfully, vibrantly, quickly. The man stared at the hospital ceiling, where he knew every crack and stain, closed his eyes, and half listened to another old man's story about catching carp with bread bait. Occasionally he'd glance at the clock, which seemed perpetually frozen. At age 30, experiencing his first hospital stay, Raphael Fisher reached a stunningly obvious conclusion. He hated all of this. All he could do was endure until his complex leg fracture healed enough for release. There was only one bright spot in this dreary existence that felt more like a plant's life than a man's. Or rather, not a spot, but a ray of light that broke through the endless hospital monotony. That ray was named Erin, a nurse in the trauma ward. There was nothing particularly special about her. She wasn't a beauty, didn't talk much, and avoided drawing attention to herself. Yet when she entered the ward, everything seemed brighter. You wanted to smile, throw away your crutches,
run to her, sweep her up and spin her around. Erin worked mostly nights, and Raphael eagerly awaited evening when she would visit the ward, smile cheerfully, and call him for injections. On particularly lucky days, she'd come with a thermometer, or blood pressure cuff, or tend to someone's IV drip, allowing him to admire her through half-closed eyelids. Raphael was born and raised in an ordinary family, the second and last child of his parents after his sister Abigail, who was 5 years older. His parents, having met and married as students, had grown weary of each other over their years together. While the children were young, they maintained some semblance of family life, but by the time Raphael turned 14, he realized his parents were merely living together out of habit, having become strangers with no real interest in each other. Eventually his father left, yet his mother had little reason to complain. Melvin had left her their large apartment and car. He faithfully sent money for the children's support, paid for their education and extra activities, and continued to support his former wife financially. By the time Abigail finished university with an impractical degree, chosen mainly at her mother's insistence, Melvin's business was thriving, and he gave his daughter a modest but decent apartment. Abigail happily moved into her own place and largely ceased contact with her mother and brother. Raphael was an average student, concerned mainly with avoiding his mother's obvious disapproval. He spent time with friends and attended freestyle wrestling classes, not for athletic achievement, but to ensure he could stand up for himself in a fight if needed. At the start of 9th grade, he had a serious conversation with his father. "Well, what are you planning to do after graduation?" Melvin studied his son carefully. "I don't know, Dad. Haven't thought about it yet." Raphael casually dismissed the persistent question everyone kept asking. "Haven't thought about it, His father shook his head. "But you should start thinking. How about working at my firm? Do you even know what we do?" "Well, you seem to race cars," Raphael replied uncertainly, feeling ashamed. He really was a fool. His father was a good man, who had always helped him with money and never refused help or advice. And he, the only son, had never even asked what his father did for a living. "Racing cars," his father said mockingly, clearly hurt. "Listen, we carry cargo and transport cars. Understand? This is real work worthy of a man. You're a man, Raphael, and you have to earn your own living. You may be my only son, but you won't live off me. If you want money, I'll teach you how to earn it." To Raphael's credit, he had never expected his father to provide for him, unlike his sister, who had received an apartment from their father. A few months later, he started working for his father's transportation company. At first he did odd jobs, courier work, helping in the car repair shop, even shoveling snow at the base after heavy storms. Following his father's advice, he enrolled in driving school. There at last, he found his calling, something that captivated him completely. "Your Raphael was born to be behind the wheel," one of the driving instructors told Melvin with a laugh. "You know, it's in his blood." Raphael loved driving with a passion. Behind the wheel he felt confident, calm, and at ease. The car became his friend, a partner responsive to his slightest movements. He had an intuitive feel for any vehicle he drove, navigating complex road situations as easily as reading a book. By 19, Raphael Fisher was considered one of the region's best young racers. "Well, well," his father would grumble, hearing stories about high-speed races. "You can play Schumacher for a couple more years, but then what? Raphael, when will you get serious? I need professional drivers I can trust, and here's my own son just playing with cars." Melvin wasn't being entirely honest. He was proud of his son's achievements, though he showed it sparingly. Raphael himself understood he had reached his peak in sports and needed to think about his future. The solution was simple. At 25, Raphael was an excellent driver who couldn't imagine doing anything else. Naturally, he joined his father's company, spending several years transporting luxury cars across the country. Raphael worked diligently, sometimes staying in the cab for days. His hard work paid off. He bought his own apartment by 30. "What did you expect?" His father laughed. "That I'd hand it to you on a silver platter? No way. I've always said a real man earns everything himself." As time passed, Raphael gained experience and grew stronger. He dated women casually, living a straightforward, uncomplicated life. He maintained normal relations with his mother and sister, mostly by phone. His mother never forgave him for not pursuing higher education, mainly blaming her ex-husband. "You listened to your father all your life, and now you'll live as an ignoramus like him, wasting your life tinkering with dirty vehicles," she would scold during their meetings. She conveniently forgot that these dirty vehicles and her loser ex-husband had provided her a comfortable life, even after their divorce. About his sister, Raphael knew that Abigail had been married and divorced twice, constantly changed jobs, and remained perpetually dissatisfied. She had sold the apartment their father gave her, investing in a dubious venture that failed. This led her back to their mother's old apartment. Neither mother nor daughter was happy with the arrangement, but they had no choice. It was the last day of autumn. Raphael was on another job, spending almost 5 days transporting a massive excavator across the country. Despite his experience, he had never delivered such a vehicle. The trawl was unwieldy and difficult to handle. Being cautious with this monster, as Raphael nicknamed it, he covered less distance than planned and was running significantly behind schedule. His father kept calling on his cell phone, hurrying his son. "Raphael, how much longer are you going to drag yourself around?" His angry voice crackled through the phone. "I'm losing my patience. The customer urgently needs this excavator, and you're arranging a sightseeing tour on the way? What's wrong with you? I don't recognize you. You need to be there by tomorrow evening at the very latest, by the day after tomorrow morning." It had been pouring rain since morning, and for several days now the temperature had dropped sharply by evening, turning the roads into skating rinks. After talking to his father, Raphael looked doubtfully at the truck's wheels. "Well, it's not winter yet. I'll speed up," he decided. On an unfamiliar curve, the heavy vehicle skidded. Fortunately, it didn't collide with anyone. It simply flew off the highway, overturned, and died in the ditch. Raphael hit his head hard, lost consciousness, and came to only in the ambulance. His bruised head, arm, and side hurt, but none of that compared to the searing, blinding pain tearing through his right leg. "Hush, hush," said an elderly woman sitting next to the stretcher. "Lie still, don't move, or you'll worsen it. Your leg's in bad shape, boy. I'm used to seeing injuries, but even I was scared to look at it. At first, we weren't sure you'd get here. We could barely stop the bleeding." She said something else, and her soothing, quiet voice lulled him as he closed his eyes. "So, I had an accident, wrecked the truck and hurt myself, all because I rushed." The leg, shattered into pieces, took several hours to reassemble. Waking up from anesthesia after the operation, Raphael stared in horror at the huge white cast suspended above the bed by some complex contraption. Finally realizing it was his own leg, he covered his eyes and took a deep breath. "Oh, you're awake," cheerfully called out a short, stubby man, bouncing briskly around the hospital ward on a single crutch. "What a healthy sleep you've had, boy." "Hello," Raphael managed to pronounce at last. "Hello, hello. Though we've seen healthier folks," chuckled the man. "Well, newcomer, let's get acquainted, shall we? By the looks of it, you're here for a long time." "You think so? Raphael said, glancing at his leg again. I suppose so. For a long time. Probably at least a month. His answer was met with loud laughter. The man with the crutch turned to look at Raphael and added, A month? You're an optimist. How about 2 to 3 months instead? He replied with strange glee. A month? That's a good one. 3 months? What are you talking about? It can't be. Horrified, Raphael shook his head stubbornly. To hell with this cheerful wag. What could he really know? He's just talking, pretending to be knowledgeable and experienced. It can't possibly take that long to heal. Raphael convinced himself that everything would be fine and calmed down. His peace of mind and hopes for a quick discharge were ruthlessly shattered during the first visit of his attending physician. Well, young man, an elderly doctor with sleep-deprived red eyes looked at Raphael carefully. How are you feeling? Fine, doctor, thank you, Raphael replied confidently, trying not to wince at the pain in his leg. Tell me, please, when will I be discharged? The doctor studied him curiously, and a hint of a smile crossed his tired face. Soon, young man, soon, he assured. Not this New Year's Eve, but you'll definitely be home by the next one. Doctor, I'm serious, pleaded Raphael. You know, I'm completely serious too. The doctor suddenly frowned. How many legs do you have now? I don't understand, doctor, Raphael muttered embarrassedly. What don't you understand? How many legs do you have now? 2. Raphael felt very foolish. Yes, 2 whole ones. And in your case, that must be considered a great fortune. You're talking about discharge? With an injury like yours, young man, you should lie here for 3 months and be thankful you're alive at all, then spend just as long learning to walk again. Now, just lie there and think. You've got plenty of time, and I'll be treating you. Hopefully I'll finish before I go to retire. Laughing at his dubious joke, the doctor looked Raphael over once more and left the room. 6 months in sum. None of it made sense. Raphael wanted to scream, howl, swear, throw something heavy at the window, and most of all, break that damned huge plaster cocoon, which seemed to weigh a ton, and anchored him to the bed like a chain. As soon as he calmed down a bit, his father burst into the room, his hair dishevelled. Raphael, son, I'm so sorry. I'm such an old fool. Melvin pulled at his shirt collar with trembling fingers and looked pleadingly at his son. It's all my fault. Dad, I'm sorry about the truck and excavator. It's probably beyond repair. Damn that vehicle. His father was nearly in tears. Well, Dad, don't worry so much. What's wrong now? Raphael suddenly found himself playing the consoler. I'm alive, and the flesh will heal, as they say. Go on now. I'm tired. Hello, gentlemen, came a soft, melodious voice. Raphael, struggling to break free from his gloomy thoughts, turned his head and opened his eyes. In the doorway stood a petite, slender figure in medical attire, her hair tucked under a cap and hands covered with rubber gloves. Though her body was completely concealed by the uniform, somehow this professional modesty was more alluring than any miniskirt or plunging neckline. The other patients clearly felt the same way. At the nurse's appearance, everyone perked up, smiled, and even tried to straighten their shoulders. Erin, hello. Hello, hello, our favourite nurse. At last! The ward residents shouted in unison. Erin, we have a newcomer, called out a man with a crutch, whom Raphael had already known as Paul. Yes, I know. She approached Raphael's bed with a slight smile. Well, let's get acquainted. I'm Erin, the nurse. Raphael gritted his teeth and turned away. He knew he was being foolish and rude, but he couldn't help it. In those brief moments he had looked at her, he had noticed that Erin was young and beautiful, lively brown eyes, a delicate nose, a blonde strand of hair escaping from under her cap, graceful wrists. It all registered instantly in his mind. "Overwhelmed," came the whistling whisper of the ever-present Paul. "That's all right," she replied. "The first days are always the hardest. It'll get easier later." A few days later, he stopped acting like a silly child. He appreciated the care from all the ward nurses, but he couldn't deny that he looked forward to Erin's shifts, counting the days until her next duty. Whenever she appeared in the doorway, the ward seemed to brighten and expand as if by magic. The young woman would enter, smile, nod slightly, and looking around at everyone, deliver her familiar greeting. "Hello, men. How are you feeling today?" They were simple, routine words, similar to those spoken by other staff members, nurses on different shifts, doctors, anesthesiologists, and the kindly, elderly cleaning lady who resembled everyone's grandmother. Yet somehow, only Erin's words made everyone want to smile back, even when fractures ached and spirits were low. "Oh, I envy you, Raphael. Youth is a powerful thing," elderly Ben, the ward's self-appointed fighter with airing in the ward, would say with a knowing wink after she left. "What do you mean?" Raphael would ask, puzzled. "What do I mean? You know exactly what I mean," the man Ben would snort. "That very thing." "Oh, nonsense," Raphael would shrug. "She's just a pretty girl with a gentle touch. She gives injections so skillfully you can barely feel them." Yes, injections, of course," the elderly man would continue, eyes twinkling slyly. Time, the best healer, passed, sometimes unbearably slowly, sometimes stretching to infinity, as one day replaced another. The first week was followed by the second and the third. December gave way to snowy and frosty January. Raphael's leg, though healing with difficulty, finally fused. At last came the day when he was allowed to get out of bed. Straightening to his full height, Raphael suddenly felt like a baby taking its first steps, and would have fallen if Erin hadn't been there. The girl quickly and deftly supported him. Despite her outward fragility and tenderness, she was surprisingly strong. When she ducked under his arm with a confident movement, putting her shoulders under for his support, he felt her strength. "Lean on me, don't be afraid," she said, sensing his uncertainty. "I've carried heavier than you. I'm strong. I'm a village girl," she added suddenly. "You're from the village, are you?" Raphael was sincerely surprised. "I would never have thought it." Erin, graceful and reserved, with delicate features on her pale face, didn't match his image of a village girl at all. In his mind, village girls were always stocky and rosy-cheeked with braided plaits. 2 endless months passed as his bones healed. Slowly the torn muscles recovered, and he began stepping carefully on his injured leg, waddling along the corridor with the help of crutches. At the end of February, the trauma surgeon who operated on his leg confidently stated, "Well, Raphael Fisher, we'll begin preparing you for discharge. Just don't jump for joy too much." Freedom at last. Raphael took a deep breath. How long he had waited for this moment. What joy that in just a few days he would be out of here. But somewhere, deep in his soul, stirred a feeling of loss. So he'll leave and never see Erin again? He would miss her smile, her quiet, gentle voice, the touch of her light, warm hands. "Erin, I'm about to be discharged," he announced when they met. "I already know," she answered calmly. "I'm very glad for you." "Erin," he suddenly became agitated. I want to thank you for everything, but most importantly, I understand." "I understand you, Raphael," she interrupted gently. "You don't need to thank me so much. It's my job." "Oh, right, of course." He felt uncomfortable for some reason. After this conversation, they never saw each other again. Raphael left the hospital and found himself under the care of his mother. The woman, who hadn't worried much about her son after he finished school and got involved with his abnormal father, as she put it, suddenly decided to unleash the full force of maternal care on him. "My boy, my sonny!" she exclaimed. "What on earth has happened to you?" "Mother," Raphael tried to stem the sudden flood of maternal love. "It happened a few months ago. It's all right now. Look." He leaned the crutch defiantly against the wall and took a few confident steps around the room. However, his mother's care and overprotection quickly became tiresome, and she left her son alone. He slowly returned to normal life, walking confidently despite his limp, meeting with friends, taking walks and breathing in the fresh air free of hospital odours, discussing work plans with his father. But no matter what he did, where he was, or what he thought about, he always felt a slight sadness, as if he had lost something critical, though he couldn't quite grasp what it was. Finally, he realised that he missed Erin. He wanted to see her, hear her voice, hold her hand, have her by his side. This revelation became so clear that it frightened him a little. Was he in love? With the nurse? With a woman who seemed indifferent to him? Unable to answer these questions, he arrived at the hospital at the end of her 24-hour shift. "But I swore to myself that I would never go near this building again." Raphael grinned to himself, sat down on a bench and waited. He was lucky. Within half an hour, he saw a familiar short figure coming out of the hospital door. Without noticing him, Erin wandered along the alley, smiling at her thoughts. "Erin, hello," he called softly. She flinched and turned towards him. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Raphael tried to joke, getting up from the bench. "And it's just me. And I'm almost not limping, see?" He took a few steps, showing her his progress. "You see, I'm almost ready to ask you to dance." He smiled, expecting her to match his joking tone as before. But instead, Erin stared at him silently, with her huge eyes, biting her lower lip. "Erin, aren't you happy to see me at all?" Raphael asked. She shook her head, and suddenly tears sprang from her eyes. She didn't sob or clam up, didn't wipe the tears away or hide her face. She simply stood there, crying, with her eyes wide open. "Erin? Erin?" Raphael mumbled confusedly, at first frightened like any man by a woman's tears, then suddenly moved by an impulse, stepped toward her, embraced her shoulders, and pressed his face against her light, smooth hair that cast a golden glow. "Erin, I love you," he whispered. Suddenly she pushed him away, wiped her face angrily, and shook her head. "No, don't you dare! Stop it! Do you hear me?" She stomped her foot on the ground. "This will never happen. You hear me? And don't you dare follow me." She strode quickly down the alley toward the bus stop, and he, stunned either by her unexpected reaction or by her equally unexpected furious rebuff, froze in a kind of stupor and sank back onto the bench. Why did she react like that? Is this how women are supposed to respond to a declaration of love? Maybe she didn't believe me, because I don't fully believe myself, to be honest. If she doesn't care for me at all, what do these sudden tears mean? Oh, God, who can understand these women? Raphael whispered, wrapping his arms around his head. The next day he was sitting on a bench near the hospital entrance again. Seeing his figure, Erin slowed her step, but after a moment's thought, she straightened up resolutely and walked toward him. "I need to have a serious talk with you, Raphael," she said, pronouncing his name with obvious difficulty. Erin stood a few steps away from him, while he remained seated, hesitant to move, feeling strangely helpless. "Erin," he began, but she firmly interrupted him. "What you said to me yesterday, it's just—" "It's true," Raphael said softly. "It's the truth. I love you." "No!" Erin cried out. "No, it's not true. It's nonsense. It can't be. Don't you understand?" "But why, Erin?" He jumped up from the bench, forgetting his limp, and stepped closer to her. "Because I can't be with you, Raphael. I can't. Don't you understand?" She suddenly switched to the familiar form, whispering through tears. "I can't be with you. Don't torment me or yourself, I beg you." She embraced him briefly, pressing herself against his chest, then resolutely pushed him away. "You won't get rid of me that easily." Raphael grabbed her arm firmly. "I love you, and you, pardon my confidence, seemed to be attracted to me too, so what's the problem? Why can't we be together?" "Because you don't know anything about me," she almost shouted. Passers-by were turning to look, and several curious onlookers had gathered on the hospital's main entrance porch. "Then tell me about yourself, and we'll decide together what we can and can't do," Raphael suggested simply. Erin was born and raised in the village, not much different from her peers, except for being prettier and smarter than most girls. She was perky, cheerful, excelled in school and was a natural leader. At dances, she never lacked dance partners or secret admirers. "Well, Erin won't stay single for long," her grandmother would laugh, shooing away yet another pimply-faced suitor from their gate. "Listen here," her mother would warn her with a stern face. A perpetually dissatisfied, grumpy woman who seemed to have forgotten feelings like joy, hope and love. "If you get pregnant, I'll throw you out. I won't tolerate such shame." "Who's talking?" Erin's grandmother unexpectedly retorted one day to her daughter's threat. "I put up with you, didn't I? Though I could have thrown you out too." Erin listened to their cryptic conversation in amazement, yet it didn't take much wisdom to understand their meaning. She had never known her father. Clearly her mother was trying to prevent Erin from repeating her fate. Realizing this, she burst out indignantly. "How can you think of me like that, Mother? How could you imagine I'd be so careless? Never!" By 17, Erin had truly blossomed. Golden blonde hair fell loosely on her shoulders, and though thick bangs covered half her face, they couldn't hide her large brown eyes with thick lashes, neat upturned nose and slightly full lips. Petite and graceful, she moved with a light, almost dancing step, usually smiling at her own thoughts, drawing lingering glances from passers-by. No one was surprised when Erin caught the attention of Doug, the most popular boy in school, the soccer team captain and acknowledged school heartthrob. He was a year older than Erin and quite intelligent. At first, as usual, Erin ignored his attention, but truthfully, she had little chance of resisting. She couldn't help but notice the envious looks from other girls at school and on the street. Doug was attentive, gentle, and said exactly the words no woman's heart could resist, let alone that of a romantic, unsophisticated girl. At his graduation party, to his classmates' chagrin, Doug brought Erin and made it clear that she was his girlfriend. Erin was in seventh heaven, feeling mature, beautiful, and most importantly, desired. The feeling intoxicated her, making her dizzy with joy. What happened next was the same story that had happened to millions of young women worldwide. Erin, though stunned and frightened by what had occurred, was nevertheless happy, especially since Doug passionately assured her that she was the most beautiful girl in the world, that he loved her and would never leave her. Doug's never lasted only a few months. In fall, he left for university in the city, and Erin discovered she was pregnant. Bewilderment gave way to speculation, then to fear, and the lovesick high school girl rushed to call her beloved. "Are you crazy?" she heard. Are you stupid? Don't you know what they do in cases like this? And anyway, why should I believe that this child is mine?"
"Whose?" whispered Erin, barely moving her lips.
"How should I know? You know best," came the reply. "You're a popular girl, so you're probably hanging around with someone."
Erin silently hung up. Like a hunted animal waiting for a blow, Erin, already thin, had withered to a shadow in a month.
"Well, tell me," said the grandmother,
who had raised Erin and essentially replaced her ever-busy mother, as she sank heavily into the chair opposite her granddaughter. The girl looked fearfully at the elderly woman and pressed her eyes into the tablecloth.
"Well, tell me or don't. Everything is clear, anyway,"
sighed the grandmother, propping her head with her palm.
"Well, what are you going to do, Erin Hallisey?"
"I don't know," whispered Erin.
"And when you were with that worthless fool, did you know?"
The elderly woman angrily slapped her palm on the table and sighed deeply again.
"Yes. What are you going to do next? The same thing everyone else does nowadays. Get rid of it?"
"Of whom?" Erin looked at her grandmother with eyes round with horror.
"The baby. Your baby. Who else?"
replied grandmother angrily. Erin protectively wrapped her arms around her belly, as if shielding it from all the world's dangers, and shook her head.
"That's right, girl. It's a sin to start your life with such terrible action."
So, Doug, the first boy of the school, proved himself a scoundrel, and Erin became a 19-year-old single mother. She gave birth to a boy without complications and named him Mike. When her son was 4 years old, his grandmother suddenly announced,
"Get ready to go to town. Come on. There's no sense sitting here all your life. Go get a profession. See the world. Live differently. Nothing will happen to your Mike," she grumbled, watching how Erin fearfully clutched her son. "I'm still of sound mind and strong enough to look after the boy."
After much persuasion and threats to curse her, the grandmother finally managed to push Erin, as she put it, out into the world. Erin went to town. She graduated from nursing school and started working at a hospital. Mike grew into a healthy, clever boy, and his great-grandmother, by her own account, felt younger beside him, though the pranks of the inexhaustibly attentive child seemed, paradoxically, to steal years from her life. Erin visited her son and grandmother at every opportunity, dreaming that the hospital in her native village would finally be renovated so she could work and live at home, close to her loved ones. Everything was straightforward until a young man with a severe leg fracture appeared in their ward. Erin, now an experienced nurse, could see that he suffered not just from physical pain, but from the powerlessness, helplessness, and small humiliations that a strong, healthy, independent man inevitably experiences in such a situation. At first, she felt only professional compassion and a desire to help, but gradually she realized that she was drawn to this dark-haired, thoughtful young man, whose face would occasionally light up with an endearing, almost boyish smile. Erin, accustomed to both genuine and feigned attention from male patients, found herself cherishing his attentive, serious gaze and his measured words. She suddenly realized that her capacity for love had awakened again, the very part of herself she had locked away as punishment after Doug's betrayal. Fortunately, it ended before it truly began. Raphael recovered and was discharged. Their farewell was awkward. He seemed to struggle with important words left unsaid, and she didn't help him find them, afraid of what might be spoken. "Well, it's good that he's finally recovered," she thought. "It wouldn't have worked out anyway. I simply have no right to all this. I have no right." She was beginning to calm down and thought less about the dark-haired patient. That's why her heart nearly stopped when she suddenly heard a familiar voice on her way to work. She couldn't take it any more and burst into tears.
She hadn't cried like this since childhood, since the day when, as a 10-year-old girl, the neighbour boys had stolen her favourite doll and let it float away downriver. The same feeling of resentment, loss and helplessness squeezed her heart now, as it had when she'd cried over her forever lost toy. He stepped toward her, pulled her close and whispered softly, "I love you." She pushed him away and ran, feeling his confused, hurt, perplexed gaze following her. When her hysteria passed, she told herself, "So be it. If he's offended, that's better. Better he be offended and dismiss me than find out about me, that I... And he's a wonderful man, and I have no right to spoil his life." When she saw his figure on the bench in the hospital square the next day, she wasn't entirely surprised. I must talk to him seriously, explain everything, tell him the truth, make him understand that it's not about him at all, it's about her. But as soon as she approached him, all those proper, honest and clear words became tangled in her throat. She tried to explain, but somehow found herself mumbling simple, tender words full of bittersweet sadness and love. Now they sat on an old shabby bench holding hands. He was gently stroking her head and whispering in her ear, while she smiled happily through her tears. "Silly girl," he murmured. "I love you, all of you, with your past, present and future. Though, about the future, I hope it won't be yours or mine, but ours, together." "Raphael, but I have Mike. People will say she's settled down, put someone else's child on his shoulders." "Let them talk. What difference does it make? Who knows who got the better deal here? I love you and want to be with you. Everything else is completely unimportant." Raphael was absolutely happy and wanted the whole world to know it. His father, upon hearing the news, scratched his head thoughtfully and said, "Well, Raphael, this is unexpected, but you know what? I'm happy for you. Really. I suppose this is exactly how it should be. If you fell in love with a girl, then grab her and live happily ever after. And honestly, as a man, I understand you perfectly." Melvin squinted slyly. "I saw her several times when I visited you in the hospital. Your Erin, she's very... well, you know what I mean. She's a real woman. Congratulations, and be happy." But with Raphael's mother, naturally things went quite differently. Upon learning that her son had involved with, as she put it, a penniless village nurse with a small child, she was horrified. "You've lost your mind." His mother stood before Raphael, her eyes flashing angrily, eyebrows arched dramatically, as she clasped her hands in a gesture both threatening and pleading. "You've gone completely mad. I knew your wretched father was a bad influence, and the fact that he nearly drove you to your grave and made you an invalid only proves my point. But that you would become utterly deranged, I could never have guessed." "Mum," Raphael sighed wearily, interrupting her tirade. "First, father isn't a wretched man, and what happened to me wasn't his fault. That's life, mother. Second, I'm not an invalid. And third, there's nothing wrong with me, physically or mentally." "Oh, really? You certainly don't seem right. A 30-year-old man in his right mind would never do such a thing, Raphael. My son." Seeing that shouting wasn't working, the mother clearly decided to change tactics. "Please, listen to me. This passion of yours, she's not a girl. If she already has a child, that means she's already, well—" "Mum," Raphael grinned, "you're talking about the child as if it's some kind of disease. Erin has a son. So what?" "So what? Are you really this stupid? You're going to burden yourself with someone else's child?" "He's not someone else's child, Mum. He's the son of the woman I love, which means he's not a stranger to me." "Why don't you just adopt him then?" she exclaimed. "I might just do that. Actually, I hadn't thought of it. Thanks for the idea." Raphael smiled, trying to make peace with his mother, but judging by her expression, she remained unmoved. "She's a country girl. Who knows what kind of family she comes from? And she herself, clearly uneducated, doesn't show any intelligence. She's just using her pretty face and figure to catch men." "That's enough, Mum." Raphael stood up firmly from his chair. "I agreed to talk out of respect. I wanted to explain everything civilly, but I won't listen to you insult Erin. Mum, I love her and want to spend my life with her. I'll be happy if you understand and accept that, and if you don't, well." Erin and Raphael lived together in his apartment. They were so content with each other that their world seemed complete, full of love and harmony. Soon Raphael offered Erin to move Mike to them, and the woman agreed with happiness. The boy quickly adapted and formed a bond with the man, who matched the child's enthusiasm for fun. Raphael many times offered Erin to marry him, but the woman was still afraid. "Let's wait a little longer," Erin always answered. "Wait for what?" he raged. "How long should we wait, Erin? I don't understand. Don't you believe me? Are you testing me?" "No, Raphael, no. What are you saying?" She looked at him fearfully and kissed him on the cheek. "I don't doubt you. Not at all. I'm just afraid of something. I don't know what. Forgive your village fool. You see, it's all too unreal. Too good. Sometimes I feel like I'm dreaming. I'll wake up and you'll be gone. Let me get used to my happiness." Soon after a few months of getting used to happiness, Erin discovered she was pregnant. In a due date, they had a baby girl, whom they named Polly. "That's it," Raphael exulted. "Now you're definitely not getting away from me. You'll have to marry me. I have a trip to the North Country in a few weeks, truck delivery. I'll come back and we'll get married. No refusal accepted. Erin, I've always dreamed of a bride in a white dress, like a princess." But Raphael did not return from that trip. He died when a car from the oncoming lane crashed into his car at full speed. How Erin endured it all. The news of his death, farewells, funerals, attempts to live without him. She barely remembered. Little Polly pulled her out of hopeless despair, demanding and noisy, unconcerned with who lived or died, or why Mummy cried all the time. Polly grew up, got sick, needed sleep, walks and play, leaving Erin little time to feel sorry for herself. A few months after Raphael's death, there was a phone call. "Erin Hallisey?" An unfamiliar voice asked. "This is a notary," he stated, pronouncing a long, complicated surname she couldn't quite catch. "I'm calling to formally notify you that there is a will in your favour." "A will?" Erin asked in amazement. "You must be mistaken." "Tell me, do you know Raphael Fisher?" The stranger's dry question, speaking Raphael's name, sent a piercing pain through her. "Yes, I do. Did," she barely managed. "Then there's no mistake," the voice stated. "I have Raphael Fisher's will in favour of Erin Hallisey, concerning his property. I ask you to come to my office tomorrow to have it read." She sat on a park bench and stared at her already silent phone. Raphael, so young, strong, full of hopes and plans, planning to live for 100 years and 3 more, left a will. It wouldn't sink in. Why? It's crazy. Could this be someone's cruel joke? She looked at the piece of paper with the notary's address, searched for it online, found the official website and wrote down a phone number. She called back and, stumbling over her words, asked to confirm the appointment. "Yes, of course, Erin Hallisey. We expect you tomorrow by 9 o'clock. said an official female voice. "Don't forget your passport, please." Erin walked toward the house and, suddenly feeling weak, sat down at a table in a small summer cafe under an umbrella. It was a mild summer evening, and her seat, cosily hidden from other tables by a small green fence, was perfect for having a cup of coffee and gathering her thoughts. She savoured the coffee's aroma. "I found out everything. Her name is Halisay. She's living in the apartment completely illegally. I wrote that in a statement to the district police officer," came a soft female voice from nearby. Hearing her last name, Erin jerked her hand in surprise and spilled her hot coffee. She mechanically wiped her hand with a napkin while continuing to listen to the startling conversation. "They never even registered the marriage. Do you realize what that means? The woman has no legal right to Raphael's apartment. We can easily evict her with all her children and belongings because we're the legal heirs." "Who's we?" the invisible interlocutor asked curtly. "We are the direct relatives," replied the woman. "I consulted a lawyer, by the way. Everything's accurate. We're taking the apartment and you're moving in." "Are you so sure about that, Mum?" "Yes, Abigail, I'm sure. And I'm also sure that neither you nor I want to live under each other's noses until we're old. Isn't that right, daughter?" "That's right," replied the daughter mockingly, and after a pause added, "And this one, what's her name? Erin, I think. What makes you think she won't object?" The woman's voice belonged to Abigail, who Erin finally realized was Raphael's sister. Her companion was his mother, who had never wished to meet her or her newborn granddaughter. "She won't object," said Erin, emerging from behind the green partition. "I only wanted to finally make your acquaintance. I'm Erin Halisay. I loved your son and brother deeply." She struggled to pronounce the words. "And I always will. It doesn't matter that he's no longer with me. I still have Polly, his daughter, and his mirror image. And you have nothing else, well, except for the apartment, of course. Goodbye." She walked out of the cafe with her head held high, resisting the urge to look back at these people, so close to her by fate, yet infinitely distant strangers. Erin and Polly left for the village. A few days later, Melvin burst in on them, characteristically dishevelled, noisy and resolute. Following him into the old house came a man in a formal dark suit and tie. It was the notary who had called Erin. He had brought her Raphael's will, which would make her the owner of all his possessions. "My boy was a good man, and chose the best woman in the world for himself. Just know I will always look out for you and my granddaughter. Yes, my dear son is not with us, but his loved ones are, and it is my job now as a father and grandfather to take care of you. The apartment is rightfully yours, like the rest of his estate. Come back and be happy, girl," Melvin whispered in her ear as they said their goodbyes.